Hey everyone, my name is Chase with CR Media. As promised, this is a combat sports, boxing, MMA, pro wrestling podcast. I've got my good friend Seth Hackett here with me. This is just the beginning of many. So thanks for joining in, Seth. Thanks for doing this with me. I'm super excited about it.
No problem, man. I think it's going to be fun. There's a couple dudes talking about play fighting and some real fighting.
Yeah, man. It's funny. So for those that don't know, Seth is a longtime friend of mine. Known Seth for a really long time, and then got reintroduced to him when we were adults. And man, when we were kids, I never knew you liked wrestling. I think we were over at Kyle's house watching a UFC fight, or no, it might have been for like the draft or something. And Josh and I made a comment about wrestling, and you said something, and I was like, "Oh, you don't know what you're talking about," and you were like, "I know more about wrestling than you think I know," and I was like,
I probably just like peppered it in like an asshole, you know?
"Yeah, no, it was yeah, it was."
Something, and like I probably kind of knew like, oh, that maybe that's not fully correct, and then like I kind of just like threw in mind like, hey, this is really how it is, and yeah. I did that for a while. Like I didn't really like talk about how I watch wrestling because like I didn't know anybody who really watched it anymore. And all of a sudden, it kind of leaked out, and now I'm just like in most of my circles, I'm like the wrestling guy.
Well, and when that happened, and then years went on where now obviously we talk about wrestling all the time, and I've always wanted to do this, and I was sitting there thinking, I was like, man, like who do I know that can kind of hold a conversation with me about it, that's smart enough to the business as I am about it, that obviously would want to, so I asked you and Josh, and you took the bait, so here we are, man.
Yeah, now we're gonna be doing this hopefully every week, and like I said, just having a good time and bullshitting about a bunch of weird stuff, really.
So how'd you get interested, and when did you get interested in wrestling?
I started watching wrestling when I was a kid. Like I don't remember like an exact thing necessarily, but what I vividly remember being really young is the Sting NWO stuff was really big with me. I remember my mom bought me the Sting mechanic gloves because it blew my mind as like a however old I was, like an 8-year-old, that you could just buy the Sting gloves at the store, even though they're just mechanic gloves. Like they literally are just like white. They just say mechanic in like white letters on black gloves. And like I just remember thinking how wild that was. So she bought me those, and they were like large size or something. So like I used to walk around the house wearing them, and these gloves would just be like dragging the floor basically because they were huge. So there was that. And then for some reason I didn't watch a lot of WWF for a while. I was a big WCW guy. It was the NWO stuff. It was the Sting stuff in particular. And then for some reason on the WWF side, the one thing that I do remember is I watched the Bret Shawn Iron Man match from Mania 12 like 100 times. And I think it's probably because maybe my mom used to let me rent those movies from Blockbuster, the VHSs. And that was kind of how it all started. It just kind of took off from there. And then I watched a lot until WCW really kind of went downhill in like 99. I switched over, watched WWF, obviously like Austin and The Rock and stuff was like really big with me. And then I watched until probably the early 2000s. I kind of dipped out for a while in the mid 2000s, kind of got back into it at the end of the 2000s, dipped back out, and then I got really big into it around 14 or 15, and I've been watching pretty consistently since then.
Yeah, I started off watching WWF, um, and it was right around the end of '94, maybe the beginning of '95. Um, I remember the first pay per view I watched was SummerSlam '95, with Sean and Razor ladder match 2, and I I don't know how, but it was a couple weeks after that I found out that it was actually a rematch from WrestleMania 10. And then,
I think the SummerSlam matches was better.
yeah, I agree. Um, and right around that time, had my mom, go to Video Junction, and when it was still around, before Blockbuster closed it down, and rented WrestleMania 10 and WrestleMania 3, and was hooked ever since. And um, kind of the same thing. I watched both pretty religiously all the way up until I think 2009, 2010. It was right around. I kind of slowed down watching, and then when when Taker retired Sean, um, there's a ESPN writer, Bill Williamson, who posted an article like the day after um, WrestleMania 26, when Taker retired Sean, and he was like, um, I'm a 30, almost 40-year-old man. I think it's time for me to stop singing "Sexy Boy" every single time it hits. And if it's time for Sean to stop, if it's time for Sean to retire, then it's time for me to put it down too. And I was kind of like, you know, as a 22-year-old man, I was like, yeah, I think it's probably time to put it down as well. Then I found out Bill never stopped watching wrestling. Um,
You just
and
wrote
then,
an article for the clicks.
and then, I picked it back up, probably on the regular in 2014, 2015. Um, which is crazy because, like, and then I went back and kind of watched what you missed, and what you missed from 2010 to 2014, was good stuff as well. Um,
I remember a lot of it. Why I got out of it in like the mid 2000s too was like it felt like every match was Cena Orton, and it was like Cena Orton or Cena Edge, and I was just done. I was like, this is like that's just how it felt to me, and I was just like, I'm kind of over this. And then I remember when DX got back together in whatever year that was, like '06 maybe, something like that.
yep.
And I remember thinking like I flipped out when that happened, and when the night they actually got back together, because they like teased it for a while, whatever. And then when they actually got back together, like I lost my mind. And then it was like a month or two after that is when it really hit me, like this is a watered down version of the old version. And I think that kind of killed me in a way too. And I think it was just like in my head, I was like, you know what? Like, I should probably like quit watching this stuff so much, like go outside or something. And I just kind of stopped for a while until I don't know. And then I decided to get back into it when I'm like 26, which is the opposite of what I thought when I was 16. But and then yeah,
Yeah.
honestly, what got me kind of back into it in like the early 2000s was some of the punk stuff. The pipe bomb, when I heard about that, was like it blew my mind. And then like I remember when he had the match with Cena at Money in the Bank, and I remember when he left, I like scoured the internet after that pay per view and like tried to find like an illegal. Someone had posted it somewhere just so I could see it because I had heard the match was awesome and that Punk actually like left. And at that time, you're kind of like, I wasn't real privy to like the dirt sheets or whatever. So I was like, what is this? Like, is he gone? And then they brought him back in 2 weeks, and I got real mad about that. But
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up because I did watch for that that month, 2 month time period because ESPN posted it. And that was what was weird to me, because ESPN didn't used to post a lot of WWE stuff, but there it was on its front page in
Yeah,
2011
punk stuff
about,
was weirdly mainstream then.
yeah. And it was about, hey, is Punk going to leave with the title, or is Punk coming back or whatever? And I was like, what is this? And then, so I got in right at that time, rewatched the pipe bomb, watched the thing with SummerSlam, and Hunter's failed attempt to bring, Nash back. And
I always forget about the Nash stuff. So crazy that they just like
yeah,
pepper him in kind of out of nowhere.
yeah, it was just so random. Uh, so yeah, I mean, so I guess it was a couple months, and then you know did that thing where I stopped watching for the summer and the fall. Got a little bit excited for the Royal Rumble that year, and I think Sheamus won the Royal Rumble because he went on to fight Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania, and it was like the quickest match in WrestleMania history or whatever.
Seconds match or whatever, where Brian just basically turned around and got bro
Yeah.
kicked and done.
Yep.
And everybody
So
was pissed because everyone was kind of hyped for that match in a way. Like at the time, like Sheamus was still kind of like a dude that people were like he's not bad. People hadn't like really turned on him yet,
no.
and obviously like everyone loved Brian, and
Yep.
then he got demolished in that match, and everyone was pissed.
Yeah. And the next night was the night that Brock returned, and I was super excited for that. But for whatever reason, I didn't keep following up and watching every week after it. I saw Brock's return, and I was like, oh wow, that's cool. And then 2 years go by, and I don't really,
That's kind of what
wrestle.
happened in a way. Like I got back with the Punk stuff, and then when they brought him back in a couple weeks, I was kind of bummed about it because I really thought that like, oh, they should probably keep him off television for a long time and really play up that this dude's a free agent and he has the title. Like, and like I kind of like looking back, I didn't think this at the time because, like I said, I didn't really like. I don't think I dove like super deep into it, but they should have had him like defending the belt on like the indies and stuff, and then just like come back like 6 months later. And I think when they didn't really hold him off television, he just came back in 2 weeks. I really thought they let like the air out of the balloon, and I was just like, well, now this kind of sucks. Like it could have been awesome, and it was awesome, and they had a lot of momentum and a lot of steam. And then they brought him back in those 2 weeks, and it was just like, and I remember because I didn't know Punk used Cult of Personality before. And I remember when he came back that 2 weeks later, I was so in the mode of this dude is not going to return for a while. And when that music hit, I didn't know it was him because they played it for a while and he didn't come out. And I thought it was going to be Colt Cabana. I remember thinking that. I was like, it's going to be Colt because I know that they're friends. And if Colt comes in, then it kind of plays into the story. They could do something with it because Cena was in the ring. And it was like after a match or something. And I was like, oh, Colt will come in and like maybe he comes out to this. And that's kind of the thing. Like, well, Colt's here, whatever. And then it ended up being Punk. And I was like, I mean, I was pumped that he was like back, but I was also kind of like, this story's like not really what it could be.
Yeah.
I think that kind of like threw me off too, to be honest.
Well, I mean, that kind of gives everybody an idea of where we'll spend most of our time on this podcast. This is just the introduction, and we've already spent 15 minutes almost talking about wrestling. We will talk about MMA and touch on MMA. I did want to ask you how, and when did you get interested in UFC MMA?
Sun and Silva 1 was the fight that got me big into MMA. A lot of that was one of my buddies, John. You've met him. He talked about this fight a lot to me before I really even like. I had not watched any MMA. Not even like when it took off from Forrest and Bonner and like whatever that was 05 from the Ultimate Fighter stuff. I just didn't. For some reason, like I had never really paid attention to it, and then he watched it a lot, and I had just really I didn't know John that well at the time, but then he was talking to me about how this fight and the build was crazy, and that Sonnen was talking all this mess, and it was just a wild build up, and how like I remember him, he kept telling me like, dude, like this Anderson Silva dude is like a real life like Bruce Lee. It's wild. And I was like, yeah, that sounds crazy, but like I don't know what's going on. And then I remember that fight happened, and I was somewhere else, and he like sent me a text message and was just like, dude, this fight is insane. Like Sonnen is whooping this dude, and like Silva's at the time, you know, obviously is like at the peak of his powers. He's like the, you know, like I said, maybe like the modern day like Bruce Lee in real fighting. And it's like, dude, like this dude just came in out of nowhere and he's whooped him for 4 rounds. And it's like, this is crazy. And I remember him sending me all these messages about it. And then out of nowhere, he just sent me a text. He was like, dude, Silva won. And I'm like, what? I'm like, you've been texting me this whole time about how he's getting whooped. Like, what happened? And he explained it to me, and how Silva snapped on the triangle and then transitioned to the armbar and all this stuff and the whole backstory of it. And that's just ever since then, dude, like I was just, I don't know what it did. It clicked, and I finally saw the fight, and that was it. And ever since then, I just been pretty keyed into the MMA world, and at least the UFC stuff. And that was it, dude. Like Silva, for some reason, resonated with me. That fight resonated with me. It was just the comeback, the story, the drama. It was like, dude, this is. I mean, you know, not to go straight back to wrestling, but it's like, dude, this is all the wrestling stuff wrapped into like dudes really punching themselves in the face.
Yeah, yeah, it's what you love about wrestling, but with like dudes really beating the shit out of each other.
Right. It's real stuff going on. And then, like I said, just like that was like the moment of like John had built this dude up to me for so long, this Anderson Silva character, who at the time I didn't know. It was just like one of my friends telling me that this dude is nuts. And then to see him do that late in the fight after getting beat up for that long, like absolutely crushed, like demolished. And then to still win, it was just like even seeing that without really having a connection to it, like when I was watching it for the first time, was just like, holy shit, like this dude is there's something with this guy. Like that shouldn't have happened. And to this day, I think it shouldn't have happened. It's very wild that it happened. But and like I said, ever since then, it just kind of the hook was in, dude, and I've been watching MMA ever since.
So what year was that? Oh,
I want to say it was like 2000. I believe that fight was 2010, maybe.
so I was gonna say '09 or 10. Um, so my first kind of like I never really wanted to get interested in MMA or like UFC. Um,
Yeah, it was
I
August 2010.
So I had a cousin who, I'm kind of like the youngest of my family, like my core family. So I had a cousin who's about 20 years older than me, construction worker, and I would work with him when I was younger. He had me on his construction site when I was like 9, just picking up trash and moving shit, and worked with him a little bit when I was 14 and stuff like that. Wasn't a big fan of his. Um,
He was making you do shit work at 9, dude. I wouldn't be a fan of him there.
well, he's paying me pretty good. Um,
Well,
but
a Happy Meal, and that was good. That was a good pay.
no, no, it was $10 an hour, and for a 9-year old back then, that was good money.
Some people
Um,
realize that you get paid anything at 9. That's pretty good.
yeah, exactly. Um, so I didn't have a great relationship with him. His mom, I always called him uncle, even though he wasn't my uncle. He was old enough to be my uncle, but he wasn't.
Mhm.
Um, and I called his wife aunt. She had the same name as my mom. I called her Aunt Diane, and I liked her a lot. And she was real cool about my wrestling fandom. She was, when mom and I didn't have cable, she made sure she would record the episodes, and then when we were after work, she'd hand me after work. She'd hand me the VHS. I'd go home and I'd watch it. And I remember one time him telling me like, "You still watch that fake shit?" And I was like, "Yeah, I still watch it." And he's like, you
You
know,
just took it on the chin. Yeah, dude, I
yeah.
still watch that stuff.
And he showed me his kickboxing and his Muay Thai trophies, and um, was like, you should watch the real shit. Where they damn near kill each other. And this was like the 98, 99 years of UFC and Pride and all those, where there was no gloves. It was just them in the octagon.
Fighters were so allowed to wear like wrestling shoes and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you know, uh, Ken Shamrock and um, uh, I can't remember his name. We were just talking about him the other day. Uh, Dan the
Oh,
Tiger.
I know who you're talking about. We were talking about not Dan Severn, were we? Was it Dan
Yeah,
Severn?
yeah, Dan Severn. Yeah, and so when those guys were real popular, and I knew what he was talking about, and in 98 or 99, my interest was there, but I was never going to be able to talk my mom into, hey mom, spend $30 on a WWF pay-per-view for me, and then turn around and spend another $30 on this you know, ultra violent sport that I want to get interested in. Um, and then it was the Ultimate Fighter season 1. Um, they made a big deal because Raw was on Spike TV, and then the Ultimate Fighter would come on right after Raw.
Was that the one with Nate?
It was the one with Forrest Griffin
No,
and
I'm
Stephen
thinking
Bonner.
it had Diego Sanchez in it.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. And Brody, Brody and I would watch it, and I don't know if you remember the Josh Koscheck and the Chris Weidman feud that went on.
Chris
I was a
Levin?
big
Yeah.
Chris Levin,
Yeah, Levin.
and I was a big Chris fan, and Brody couldn't stand him. Brody hated him. He was a big Josh fan, and
I
I,
like
I
Kyle too. I don't know why I liked him. He was kind of a dirtbag, but
yeah
I really wanted him to be at GSP when he fought him for the title, and dude got his eye all busted up.
yeah
But
not definitely not. Uh,
he didn't have a shot, but we were pulling for him. I don't know why.
but man, I watched that first season of The Ultimate Fighter, and then I was like, this is a lot different than what I saw in the late '90s. And it was it was cool, and that final match between Stephen Bonner and Forrest Griffin. I mean, they call it the greatest. They called it the greatest fight at that time, and it held that title for a while. Um,
Well, it sent them to new heights for sure. I mean, I
yeah,
remember I, I think it's one of the rare occurrences where I believe they said like the ratings for that episode like continued to climb until like the peak was actually at the end of the fight,
yep,
which is insane. That normally doesn't happen, but it's just wild, and that's what really propelled it in like pretty much a new era.
yeah, and that's what propelled it for me because I watched it. I watched it on the regular after that. Um, because like you said, it's the same thing. It's everything that I love about professional wrestling, but it's real fighting. Um, the drama, the they're going in and telling a different type of story when they get in the octagon, and it's to me it's just always been really cool.
Well, and I have like a profound like respect for how many things that these guys have to do to just be adequate in MMA. Not trying to disparage boxing at all or any other type of fighting, but the fact that like this is everything kind of wrapped into one, and you kind of have to do. You don't necessarily have to be like an expert at everything, but like you have to at least have some sort of skill in most forms of combat to be a world champion, unless you're obviously like incredible master it. But in this day and age, like, I don't know. I just find it. I find it very interesting how these dudes, how they do it, and how they, have to train, and all the different aspects of how you can win a fight, and I just find all that stuff really interesting. I think it's a very hard sport to be good at, and I think that also is something that always, like, it's the same thing with wrestling to me. Like, I think it's a hard craft to be good at, and that's why I find these both of those things very fascinating.
No, no. I mean, like we've seen it. We've seen it in UFC and MMA throughout the years, where they've taken guys that are exceptionally, substantially great at one thing they do, whether it's boxing or just just straight up fighting, and put them in an octagon. And those are the guys that usually will get wrapped up and folded out because you know the guy standing across the octagon from him not just only knows boxing, but he also knows grappling, wrestling, knows kickboxing, knows various other things, but it's not just one sided. So you have to have a craft in almost a lot of areas. We saw that with Kimbo Slice. Everybody saw Kimbo on YouTube or on the internet and was like, "Oh yeah, he'll kill those guys when he steps in the octagon with them," and that didn't happen.
Well,
So
it's even like, if you take it from even the perspective of a guy who was in MMA for a really long time but only excelled at really one thing, like Damian Maya. Dude was a jiu-jitsu master, one of the greatest of all time in that particular field, but he was never really good at striking. He was never really good at traditional, like, American wrestling. He was never, he never really polished anything else off, and he never became world champion because of it. He did get all the way to a title fight, which really, if you think about it, it's pretty incredible, just because he was really only good at jiu-jitsu. But to do it in, like, the advanced era of the sport, or the more advanced era of the sport, because it's still really in its infancy, and get that far with only being really, really, really good at one thing is pretty remarkable. But again, never became a champion. And I think it's because, like, especially now, which we're kind of beyond the Damian Maya era, but now I think a lot of these guys, they have to excel at everything if A, they want to be champion, and B, they want to be champion for more than just a fight or two. I mean, we saw it in the Francis fight. I mean, he wouldn't have won that fight if it wasn't for something other than what he excelled at.
yeah, and just kind of the way the sport has just evolved. Um, it's kind of, I guess, gotten more broadened, I guess you would say. Because, like I said, you go back to what I was talking about in the late '90s, where it was big beefy dudes that took jujitsu and kickboxing and went in there and pounded each other, and now they've got eight, six, seven different weight classes of different guys, and it's on a worldwide level, not just like it's not just a pay-per-view event. So
Well, and it's, especially in the early days, it was basically like, it was supposed to be the ultimate test of, can this, can a, like, a sumo wrestler beat a world class American wrestler? Like, can can this boxer beat, whatever? And it was about, like, matching those up and seeing, like, what style really is the best. But now it's evolved into such a different level, where it's like, now most fighters have wrapped all these things into one, and now people are just, they're good at everything, on top of like us having just, like, a different, I mean, from 93 when it started until now, the type of athlete is just substantially different. And you see that in every sport, not just MMA, but it truly is a lot more advanced than what it used to be back then.
So, just to kind of keep this thing going, what is your favorite memory, or when you got interested in boxing, or if you are interested in boxing, of course.
My boxing stuff is kind of cliched, I feel like, because, well, from our era anyway, like our generation. The first boxing memory that I have is, I don't even know particularly what fight, but I remember my father ordered a Mike Tyson fight. I remember that he had issues with the pay-per-view ordering it. I remember he ordered like 50 wings from Hooters. I remember that. He had a couple buddies over. I didn't know what was going on. I was just a kid. And then I remember for some reason, and I don't know how he even got this information across the wire, because it's the mid 90s and like we don't really have cell phones and shit. Let alone my dad probably didn't know how to access any form of the internet. Not that anyone did. And I remember for some reason he had just looked and had saw, oh, the Tyson fight's over. Glad I didn't buy that. And he only didn't buy it because the feed, like the thing screwed up. So my first memory of boxing isn't even actually seeing boxing, which is kind of wild. But then beyond that, the first thing I saw was my dad bought the Tyson Holyfield fight when he bit his ear. I remember seeing that. Again, I was very young. I remember being very confused until I had heard a bunch of grown men screaming about how they finally figured out that he had actually like bit this man's ear off. And it kind of just like shook me as a kid. I was like, what? Like, guys do this? Like, what are we watching? Like, what is this? And the worst, the funniest part about it is I remember them yelling about it the first time when Tyson bit him, because he bites him twice. And then me being in a state of confusion as a little kid, not understanding what's going on, and then hearing a bunch of grown men scream like, oh shit, he did it again. And then seeing it and seeing the ear on the ground and all that stuff, that's my first actual boxing memory is that, which I think a lot of people from our generation probably somehow kind of like remember that a little bit. I mean, it was a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And at that time, Tyson was like, you know, the biggest name in the sport and whatever. But yeah, that's actually my first memory. I don't know why I vividly remember the Hooters wings, but I do. I remember the 50 Hooters wings. I remember my dad. I remember his buddies over. I remember him not being able to get the feed to work. And I don't know how he found out that the fight was over. It was like the second round. Tyson had already knocked him out. And he's like, I'm glad I didn't buy that fight.
Yeah. So that's my first memory of boxing. You know, of course, I knew what boxing was, knew boxers, but, you know, the finding out about Holyfield biting, or about Tyson biting Holyfield's ear, was just bonkers to me. You know, and my mom is, you know, she's probably a generation older than most of the moms of the kids my age. So my mom was immediately like, you know, that's barbaric. You know, that's
It was
ridiculous.
barbaric. She wasn't wrong.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. Granted,
It's
you know,
so crazy to say that happened. The man's
yeah,
ear was on the mat.
yeah. And, you know, I'm already watching, you know, I'm already watching professional wrestling at that point, you know, and we had to have like deep talks, you know, because she's like, I don't know if I want to let you keep watching this wrestling stuff. If this is where this is all going? I'm like, you know, I'm 9 years old, and I'm like, Mom, it's fake, like it's scripted, like don't take this away from me.
Until she walks in the room one night and she sees a bunch of grown men telling other grown men to suck it. Like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, and and you know, that was always the funny thing. You know, my cousin that I was talking about, um, you know, he didn't like, you know, he made fun of me all the time because I watch wrestling, and he didn't like Austin 316. He thought that was blasphemous, you know. And I was like, but you watching guys beat each other to bloody pulps is not.
Well, yeah, it's like pot calling the kettle black
Yeah.
deal. But
So so then after the Tyson Holyfield thing, obviously they bring Tyson in to WWF, and like after WrestleMania when Tyson left, I was like, well, where's Tyson at now? Like I want to see more of Mike Tyson, so we started watching boxing then, and boxing was kind of like, or my fandom with boxing was similar to my fandom with wrestling. Was it just got to a point where it was like, this isn't fun anymore, and I don't want to watch this. So I stopped watching it for probably 8 to 9 years. Um, and I've still followed it. I'd read articles and kind of, still pay attention to what's going on. And I think I finally started picking it back up about 4 years ago, right after Floyd retired. Just because, for me, when Floyd was fighting, after about 20 fights in, boxing just became kind of boring because I felt like Floyd kind of owned everything in boxing. And that's a catch-22, and we can dig into that further, but it kind of brings me to like the state of boxing today, like where it's at today. Um, and as somebody who follows it, that's kind of like my theory, or not my theory, but my opinion on what the state of boxing is today is, it's kind of just it's been in a lockhold by Floyd's productions for so long that now it's kind of getting out of that. Now we're kind of seeing more guys that aren't a part of Floyd's camp, that have nothing to do with Floyd Mayweather or Mayweather Productions or whatever, coming in and kind of trailblazing their own way with the sport. So
Well, I think too what it kind of lacks is there's not. I guess it depends on how you view it, but I feel like that there's not a lot of like massive, massive, massive draws. But at the same time, I mean, guys like Canelo draw. I mean,
yeah,
DAZN paid him all that money to basically be almost like an exclusive fighter on their stuff, and you can look that up if you wanted and dive into that whole thing and how that was that's kind of a whole different conversation in itself. But Canelo does draw, and he is tremendously talented and very good. And then Tyson Fury draws, and he's again, he's in the weight class that you want to, you want the main guy of your of your sport. If it's going to be combat sports, usually to be a heavyweight, because the heavyweight division historically has always been the better drawing division, not the smaller guys, even though Floyd kind of debunked that, and certain guys have. But ever since Floyd went, I mean, Pacquiao was, on the backside after that. And it just kind of feels like that there's no real mega stars anymore. There's no Tysons, there's no Ali's, there's no real transcendent guys. But again, sometimes I think that's just how you look at it. If you want to look at boxing in like more of a skewed way and see it that way, then you're going to see it that way. But I think there is an argument to be made that there are a couple guys out there, and there are maybe some upcoming guys. And then, with the Paul stuff, I mean, those guys are bringing eyeballs to the product, whether you hate it or you don't. I mean, and they're, not only theirs, they're bringing eyeballs to everything. They're bringing eyeballs to MMA too. I mean, they're bringing YouTubers in who followed them from that, people who followed them when they were on Disney and stuff. So, I think I don't it's, these people that come out here and say that boxing's dying or that it's dead, that's not true. Boxing still makes money hand over fist, and and it's probably always going to be that way. So I think it's in a much different state than when Floyd was at his peak, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. It's just different.
yeah, no, I don't think boxing was ever dying. I just think that when you know Floyd, everybody's got their hands in Floyd's pocket, is how it was the last the last, not 10 years, but I'd say probably the last 8 years. Maybe a little less than that. But it was his guys getting the spotlight. You know, the networks are in his pocket, Showtime, whatever. Um, everything circled around him. So when he got his vice grip off of the product, then we could move on to other things. Um, yeah, Tyson Fury's really popular. Um, you know, and then you mentioned about the Pauls, and I had it in here. Um, obviously it sounds like you already gave your opinion on it, but I wanted to ask if we thought the Paul brothers were ruining the sport, or if celebrities are ruining the sport. And like I said, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that it's bringing viewers to it that weren't normally weren't normally going to watch it. Because I assure you, Jake and Logan Paul's fans, probably watched that fight in some way, shape, or form. Most of their fights, and those are people that probably never would have bought a boxing event or watched a boxing event in their life if they had a choice. So, you know, I I think that's I think it's kind of
It's
a
another.
good thing for them.
I kind of just feel like, again, it depends on how you look at it. If you're a boxing purist, I think you probably do think that it probably is hurting the sport. But also, like, there's another conversation to be had when the people think, when they want to argue that that's hurting the sport and the purity of it. But for pro boxing to thrive, they need money just like anybody else. They need viewers just like any other company that, thrives on television and network rights and all this stuff. So, and they are bringing in viewers. And then the other thing is like, I know that some of these fights come across as like kind of freak show type things. But when it comes to Jake Paul in particular, he might be good. So it's kind of like, is he really hurting it from like a purist standpoint if he's actually good? Like he might actually have, like, he at least has some form of skills. Like, I know that, there's people out there who want to clown on like guys like Woodley for getting straight up put in the grave in that second fight. But Woodley's a real fighter. He was a UFC champion. Boxing is not his forte. He has a wrestling background first and foremost, but he was a decent striker in MMA. Now, boxing, striking, in boxing and MMA, the MMA version of boxing is very much different than the boxing version of boxing.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So, when that dude gets put in the ground like that, a lot of people want to clown on him for all that. But at the same time, it's not like Tyron Woodley isn't a real trained athletic fighter. And Paul beat him pretty easily in a couple fights. And now the Askren thing, I kind of just don't pay attention to. Askren was never even a striker in MMA, and he was well past his prime, coming off major hip surgery. So yeah, I think it was like one of those things that, like, when you look at it on paper, like, Paul beat a real dude because he was a real fighter. It looks
beat him twice.
Yeah, which also, Paul's playing the game. Like, he's obviously booking these fights for himself in a smart way, because Woodley's also clearly at the end of his career. It's not like he fought Woodley when he was the UFC champion. That would have been very different. And Woodley also, his style of fighting favors a guy like Paul, who is still very much in the infancy of what he's doing, where Woodley is patient and he sits and he waits and he tries to hit you with one big shot. And Paul probably knew, like, hey, if he's going to do that, I could just pepper him. And, maybe I catch him, maybe I don't, whatever. And, but it plays kind of into his hands. So I think that was all smart. But I don't think how you, if you really think that you really want boxing to strive, I don't think you can necessarily say these guys are bad, because they're generating people and viewers and money. And
Yeah, no, and that's good. I mean, it was like what we talked about. It's like when USC, you used to be able to not watch USC unless you bought a pay per view, at all. There was never prelims. There was never fight nights. None of that stuff.
Well, in the
Of course,
early days too, it's not like they were having one a month either.
yeah. No, it was a rarity. So it's the same thing with boxing. Yes, these are pay per view events, but the popularity of boxing would rise to a point where they could get a television deal, they could get an internet streaming deal, so more people could watch it, and the popularity would grow. You're going to see more fights, better fights. Do I think the Paul brothers are douchebags? Absolutely. Um,
I think that
do I?
they don't even know that they're douchebags deep down.
Yeah, for them to do what they've done, and
Does the same shit. Connor might actually kind of be, he might kind of be a douche for real. But some of this shit is it's an act. It's part of the game.
yeah, it's what they they've done vlogs of themselves since they were fucking, before vlogs were popular. They were doing the same thing that you and I are doing right now before it was popular.
Yeah, they were
Um,
stars in that field.
you know, so I don't necessarily think they're ruining the sport. If you don't want to like them, you don't have to like them, but putting more eyes on the sport, it's a big, um, it's a big deal for boxing because, like I said, there's just a lot of people who aren't interested in boxing, who did think boxing, or did think boxing was dying off, because in my opinion, it was monopolized. And say what you want about say what you want about Paul brothers in general. They've also brought up a fantastic point nowadays with with fighters and getting paid. Um, you know, why
Which
would
I mean,
why would Woodley call Dana and get paid, you know, a couple hundred grand, and risk getting injured, or a career ending by somebody younger, quicker, when he could call Jake Paul or Logan Paul and fight them and make way more money.
right. I mean, boxing is really where the money's at. I mean, look what Francis is talking about boxing. Junior Dos Santos has talked about boxing. Connor has boxed, and I wouldn't doubt if at some point he goes back to that world, because that is, even for as much money as Connor makes in the UFC, which is a shitload, especially compared to everyone else, he still does not touch the payday he made when he fought Floyd.
Yep.
And that's just the reality of it. And it's because there is no union. It's because there is no CBA. It's because Dana and Endeavor and the owners of the UFC have, they put these fighters in a corner, because also the UFC in particular is, an MMA is in such an infancy that they kind of, there's, for a long time, there's really nowhere else these fighters can go. So when they end up in the UFC and they're only making whatever it is of the revenue. I mean, I know it's in the teens. I don't know the exact percentage, but the fighters only make so much of the revenue. And then you got other sports where some of them have a 50-50 split. Some of them, it's not 50-50, but it's close. It's, like 46-54, something like that, which is still a hell of a lot more than making whatever the UFC is paying their guys. And you're going out there. I mean, for example, the prime example is the last big fight we saw was Francis defending the heavyweight championship belt, and he made $600,000 as a base.
Where
It's crazy.
Yeah, and I saw Bellator is paying their champion millions.
Yeah, which again is it is a lot of that is to do with the good thing about going to Bellator is that they let their fighters have their own sponsorships. They let them have cut deals with people, and the UFC does not, and that is a problem. Yeah. But ever since they signed that Reebok deal, which is now gone, and it was to me, as just a fan of this of the UFC and of the sport, to me it was a complete failure. and all it did was cost fighters money, and it didn't allow them to be able to branch out as much as they should have. And Bellator does allow you to do that. So Bellator can still pay, a little bit less than what the UFC pays fighters as a base pay, which isn't good most of the time. I mean, you got guys like Jose Aldo, who's headlining cards, who's one of the greatest of all time, who's, in his mid to upper 30s, who's done everything, and he's still only getting like 500 grand. Jose Aldo, like, that's kind of crazy. I know he's not a massive name to, like, some outsiders, but if you're plugged into the sport, like, Aldo was the man for like 10 years, and he's still making like $500,000. And again, Francis made $600,000, which, granted, he did admit after the fight that he had turned down a new offer from the UFC, and it probably did cost him millions, is what he said. But he is fighting for something bigger than being tied down to a contract when he thinks his value is a lot more than that, and that's why he turned it down. So he could have made more money, but it's still just crazy that, like, this is happening for main events of massive cards.
So I guess, I guess my question would be, is pay the answer for the lack of heavyweights in the sport?
I don't think that has much to do with it. I think the heavyweight division has just been I think it's tough. I think a lot of these, I mean, it's tough to be, to find quality MMA fighters at that size. Not that they don't exist. But I just think, like, other divisions are a little bit more richer. I mean, a lot of guys also, again, I think MMA being so young still is, everything's still evolving. And I don't think that has much to do with it. But at the same time, they've had moments where they've had a few guys. I mean, the era of when JDS was at the peak of his powers, and he was and him and Kane were like the big feud. That was a big deal. Fedor, but the UFC could never land him for whatever reason. So I think he never really turned into the megastar he probably should have. We've had guys like Fabricio Verdun, who really didn't take off into superstardom, but was a big name for a while. So they've had moments, but I don't think it's so much pay. I think it's just so much that, like, it's hard to be a really skilled MMA fighter when you're also 250 pounds. I mean, I think in boxing it's probably easier because you're just standing. Like, it's a striking game. When in MMA, if you have a guy like Stipe who's 230 pounds, who's on the lighter side of heavyweight, who's going to wrestle these big fuckers to the ground, like Francis, like he did in their first fight, then it kind of, it's just, I think it's harder for those guys to be those type of fighters, to be wrestlers, because they're so large. So I think that has something to do with it. And, I don't know. I also just think that I think it's hard to find these guys.
So, the theme of this show tonight was just supposed to be an introduction, kind of get, where we are with boxing, MMA, and wrestling. Didn't really want to break down the card, but I did want to ask: was it surprising to see Francis out wrestle Gagne?
This is what I told a friend of mine. I don't think it was the most exciting victory, but I do think it was the most surprising.
Yeah,
I think it was the most shocking, because I wouldn't doubt if Cyril didn't even train in wrestling at all leading up to this fight. And he actually has like an okay ground game, but I would not doubt if he didn't train in it one bit, because no one thought Francis was going to do that and then win that way. And honestly, he looked great. That's what's more insane. It wasn't like, oh, he got a takedown or a slam, because, like, maybe that can happen. He gets weird positioning. He's a big dude, super strong, super large. He gets some leverage. He can slam probably anybody. But the thing is he slammed him, and then he had ground control. He had good jiu-jitsu. He actually set up a couple, like, he got close to a couple submissions there for a while. And the thing that's most impressive is he did all that again with a pretty much a blown out knee. They're talking about maybe him not coming back until next year.
Yeah, so he did it with an MCL.
Yeah, it was a torn ACL and an injured ACL.
Yeah. And that was the talk before the fight was, for people that don't know, Francis has um, an insanely inhuman like strength as far as striking goes. They There's a video on the internet I saw where they talked about how hard Francis can hit, and it's unheard of.
I
Um,
believe it's Francis that I believe they sent him to their performance center in Vegas, and he punched. They have like a punching machine,
mhm.
and he punched it once and like broke the all-time record.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, dude's a freak.
yeah. Like
Also,
Dana White.
off the street. Like, do you know the story of how they found him? He was
Yeah,
just like a dude, and he was
yeah,
huge. And they were like, "You should fight," and he was like, "Okay." And now he's the world heavyweight champion. Like, it's wild.
yeah. So, so it was shocking because everybody said, "Hey, like we all know that, or we all think Francis is going to win this fight, but Francis isn't going to win it."
Well, he
By,
was the underdog. Did you know that?
I
He was the
did,
underdog coming in.
but like all the predictions I saw were, "Hey, like Francis is going to win this fight, but don't look for Francis to out wrestle Gagne. Like if it goes to wrestling, Gagne could win this fight." And to see that I mean, he out wrestled him and won.
And it wasn't
Was
close. That's what's
Yeah,
nuts. It wasn't even
yeah,
close.
yeah.
The thing,
I
the thing that's crazy to me too, I was thinking about it after the fight happened, and it's just kind of like, can you imagine? Can you imagine coming into that fight and being Cyril and just thinking to yourself, like, you know what? Like, if this goes to the ground, like, I'm good. I'm cool. Like, I'll be all right.
Yeah,
And then somehow gets there, and then to get up after that first round, that third round when he got taken down and Francis like held him on the ground, and just to get up in between rounds and just he had to be thinking, what the fuck was that? And then when the fight ends, to sit there and just think like, this is the one scenario that we literally didn't even think of because it was so unfathomable, and it happened.
yeah,
It's like when the Patriots went into '07 undefeated against the Giants. There was a lot of people who was just like, all right, like, can we just wrap this thing up? Like, just give them the trophy. And then the
yeah.
Giants win, and you're kind of like, what happened? And this is
On
exactly
those,
what happened. It was such a freak thing. It was just like, what did we just watch?
yeah, like the last 2 minutes of that game, talking about the Patriots and the Giants was just like, what am I seeing? Like, why did that just happen?
Yeah,
Um,
the fight it made no sense. It was the exact same thing. And just there's nothing about it that I can even explain. The problem is too is not that it happened, was that Francis Lee good on the ground.
yeah,
That's what's nuts. It's one thing to get it, like I said, to get him down once or twice, maybe control him for a little while. Because again, Francis is a big dude. But you would think like once he loses positioning, like Cyril's gonna get up, he's gonna figure it out. And then also,
he's gonna shift him.
yeah, and then like all of a sudden it was just like, oh shit, like Francis is kind of good at this. Like then it kind of makes you think like I want to see if it happens again, because it is like it's hard not to think like, was that just like a weird night? If it, but then he had a blown out knee, and he was down. That's what's nuts too. He was down 2 rounds to 0 going into the third, like pretty objectively. Like most people think he lost the first two,
Yeah,
and Cyril was just kind of cool. Like, I'm just gonna outpoint this dude. And Francis to me on the feet looked pretty slow. Like, and I don't know if it's because he got gassed pretty early, because his gas tank, historically not great. Also blown out knee. We found that out later, which also little smart move that he pulled wearing the 2 knee things. So the rumors start swirling. Hey, throw the 2 on, so that way Cyril doesn't know what knee's going on. Like that. But I just it was a really, honestly, it was one of the more wild moments I think since I've started watching fighting, just because it was so out of left field.
yeah. Because I mean, like going into those fights, you think you know what's going to happen, and then for it to go a completely different way, it just makes the fight that much more entertaining.
Or at least,
Um,
yeah, I remember that. I think it was just a kind of add one more thing that made it kind of nuts is I think they had that just not even winning the way he won, but I think the betting odds of that fight going the distance was like 1 in 16. It was just like it was so like no one saw that happening. Even going the distance, like standing, they would have stood the whole time and went the distance. We'd have been like, "Wow, that's fucked up." Like we didn't see that coming at all. And then he took them down and added on top of that, and it went the distance. Like, it's just wild.
So I don't know if you saw or not, but one of my favorite fighters tweeted after the fight. Um, at the end of the day, I'm fucking them both up, and then
That's,
he deleted it.
that's your boy right there. I didn't know that.
No, he's not my boy. I was being a smartass. Uh, I'm not a John Jones. I'm a John Jones fan when John Jones first started. Um,
He was my favorite fighter for a long time.
yeah, no, mine too. But when you pay to when you're excited for a fight and you're looking forward to paying for a fight to watch him fight, and he can't stop doing cocaine off of strippers' buttholes, then then he doesn't he goes down on your list of favorite fighters.
Yeah,
Um,
his personality turned me off too. That was really where, yeah.
uh,
He might not be the best of people.
um,
A hot take.
yeah, and not to get too sidetracked, but um, him beating DC just
I was bummed
you
out
know,
for me when it happened the last time.
yeah,
Especially because like I don't know if it was so they fought 3 times, right?
yeah,
So I don't remember if it was the third one or the second one, but one of them I thought DC was winning the fight, and he just got hit with that kick to the head, and it was just
yeah.
he got
He got down, and then when they got him back up, he got mad. That was the one where I was kind of like, man, like I felt for him. You felt like not the heartbreak, but almost like the embarrassment for him because he got up and he didn't know that the fight was over with, and he
yeah.
went over and he started like he pushed a bunch of people and was like,
pretty good after that one too. That's where they
yeah,
made the DC memes, like, and people thought the DC crying meme was going to take over the Jordan meme. I
yeah.
mean, it's pretty rough.
Nothing will ever take over the Jordan meme.
No, that's
Um,
scary.
just to kind of preview February's UFC 272. Um, no, that's not February's. I'm sorry, February's is Israel. But we'll talk about February's later on. It was announced this month that UFC 272 in March was going to be Covington and Masvidal. So just kind of some early thoughts on that.
I think it's a good matchup that'll sell. I think people still love Masvidal. I think he loses. And it's one of those fights that I could see Masvidal winning, but he's probably gonna have to knock him out. And honestly, I think if Covington won like fairly easily, I don't think I'd be surprised. If Masvidal won, I wouldn't necessarily be surprised either. It's not like Masvidal isn't skilled. I just think that at this point, I think Covington's a better overall fighter. There's also a chance. Let me look here. There's also a chance that Masvidal could be sort of kind of on the back nine here. He hasn't looked terrific lately, but I think Covington wins, which I think kind of puts everything in a weird spot too, because Covington's now had 2 opportunities at the title against Usman. He lost both. Neither one of them are in question. One of them he got finished, so you can't question that.
Yeah.
And not that he didn't look good. I think Covington could be a champion, but I just think Usman's better. And if Usman doesn't lose the belt, then how are they going to sell Covington as a number 1 contender coming up? Not that I think they're going to even be interested in really putting him in a title fight soon, but like it still puts him hanging around that top 1, 2, 3 contenders.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think it's a good fight. I think it's an interesting fight. It's a fight I want to see. They don't like each other, so that's always money in the bank. Guys,
Yep.
legitimate heat between some of these guys. But I think Covington wins, and I wouldn't be surprised if he wins pretty easily.
I'm right there with you. I just, and maybe it's because Masvidal's just been kind of on the back burner for so long. I've seen more of Covington lately, and know that Covington is he's in pretty good fight shape. Um, I I wouldn't be surprised if Covington won. And in fact, that's my prediction of who's going to win. My way too early prediction would be Covington. Um,
Also,
so
Masvidal, very sneaky, is 37 years old.
yep,
Which I know when I see it, I'm like, oh yeah. But whenever, like, I don't ever think about it. But he's been around forever. Yeah, he
yeah.
lost to Usman twice in a row too, which I forgot. But he got that knockout, that last one. Boy, oh boy, that thing was rough. That dude got cracked. He hit his head on his shoulder. They had that cool picture of all the sweat in his whole entire body flinging off. And we haven't seen him since. Dude got sent into another dimension working his way back.
Uh, I was going to say the last time I saw Masvidal was actually on AEW television.
Oh yeah,
Um,
show up. I forgot about that.
yeah, and I noticed he had a little gray in the hair, but that doesn't mean anything. We got a friend named Josh who's had gray in his hair since he was 20.
Never not had gray hair. I mean, I can't really say much. I got no hair, but it ain't gray, brother.
Yeah, there you go. um, so I guess we'll wrap up MMA and boxing. Who's your favorite fighters
Currently or ever or both?
currently?
Oh boy. Well, let me start with ever. Ever is kind of those are just locks. I go back and forth on current guys because sometimes you get attached to somebody and then all of a sudden they start getting worked and the next thing you know they're
Yeah.
retired. I was a big Alexander Gustafsson guy for a really long time. He beat John Jones, by the way, in the first fight. You can't tell me anything differently. I was a big fan of his, but then whenever he came back from a little bit of a hiatus, he actually retired for a while, came back to the heavyweight division, lost. It's kind of lost the luster for me. I was kind of bummed out by it. I was a big fan of his for a really long time. John Jones was my favorite fighter for a really long time, but that was earlier in his career. I was like super hyped when he won the belt. And then once he kind of became my thing with Jones too is like, it's fine. It's not fine. It's not fine that he's kind of like a real dirtbag, but like with some of the stuff, it's like, bro, just lean into it, dude. Just be the heel. Like, just be the bad guy. Like, it's fine. Like, as long as you're not like a real life dirtbag, which he is. But like, if you're not, and it's just like, dude, just lean into it. Be the bad. You can be the bad guy. We need those. We need the bad guy. He can do
Well,
that.
I think he has embraced that role.
I think he's done it more lately, but there was a
Yeah.
stretch where like he was trying to fight it, and it was like, brother, like we're not that dumb. Like some of us are pretty dumb, but we ain't that dumb.
Yeah, because it was when it was one of the fights with DC, and DC told him he was like, if you plan to show up, who knows, you may go do some coke. And then John was like, I'll beat your ass after a night of doing coke.
Yeah, I do remember that. Yeah, that was kind of around the time where he did kind of lean into it. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I've had kind of a weird relationship with John Jones in my fandom. And then it's hard not to say that like Anderson will always have a special place in my heart. I absolutely when he had a fight for me personally, at least, and some other people I know, but it was a big deal. Anderson fighting was a massive deal, and the stuff he was doing at his peak was absolutely nuts. So Anderson, Junior Dos Santos was a big favorite of mine for a really long time. I was bummed out when Kane absolutely rearranged my boy's face, but him winning the belt was another big deal to me. Like him knocking out Kane, first Fox show ever. which was a very weird moment because it was a cool moment, but I remember that night very vividly because I remember the show started and there was 45 minutes of just people talking, and it was like, hey man, like, is there going to be more fights on this card, or is this the only fight? And then it happened, and you're like, oh, that was the only fight, and it lasted 45 seconds, so that's very cool. It was cool for me because JDS won, but I get why people were upset. So that was like a weird thing. Currently, I would have to say currently, probably my favorite fighter is probably Max Holloway. Holloway's an absolute stud. Dude's just like down to brawl with guys. He's super well rounded. His striking's just like it very well could be the best in the world to me. Like it's nuts. And again, like Holloway to me, I don't think he's obviously not the same type of star as Anderson, but I think he's going to be a Hall of Famer. I think he's one of the greatest ever. And when Holloway fights, to me personally, it's a big deal because the dude's good. All his fights are going to be great. And I can't get enough of Max Holloway fights. I think currently he's probably, for the moment, unless you ask me tomorrow, then it may change. But in this very moment, I think my favorite fighter is probably Max Holloway.
I would say today my favorite fighter is probably Israel. Um, I love the way he fights. Um, and I love just his his attitude, his swagger that he brings to it. You know, obviously, like I said, you know, I love the sport. I love everything about the sport. But I love professional wrestling, and you know, you'd be lying to yourself if you said you didn't love the dramatics, the theatrics of professional wrestling. So when you get personalities like that, like you know, like Chell and um, you know, Connor and you know, guys just have that personality to them. You know, it's hard for me not to like them. So
Israel's a lot of fun. His style when he's on is a lot of fun to watch.
yeah,
He's very skilled. He's one of those dudes that like it kind of blows my mind that he's not like a bigger star. I think he's a star, but just the fact that like I don't know, man. Like I still think there's too many people in the general public that if you say Israel Adesanya, they don't know who that is.
yeah.
I think
No,
that's kind
I agree. You know, I was super excited to see him move up to heavyweight. You know, obviously it was a little heartbroken when he lost. It's going to happen. Guys are going to lose. But you know, he's my favorite today. And then from past, you know, I mean, I know he's not retired, but Connor is probably my favorite fighter from past.
I
Because you
hung
know,
on, I hung on to some affection for Connor for a really long time. Lately, he's kind of soured me.
I, you know, for the longest time watching, you know, watching MMA, I never really migrated to one guy where I was like, man, I really like him. And then when Connor came in, and Connor was just, you know, Connor was the first guy I'd seen people throw trash at, um, you know, and just draw legitimate like
Sometimes the people
hateful.
throwing trash at him were other fighters. That's how
Yeah. So you know, Connor and Izzy are my two guys. Um, you know,
Connor. I wouldn't be surprised if Connor wasn't done sooner than later, but who knows with that guy, man? He's all over the place. So he could be a good answer for past favorite fighter.
yeah, I mean, I don't know if he fights again. I just don't. I
Isn't
think
That's for sure.
yeah, I could see him doing some celebrity shit with the Pauls. Um, you know,
He loses another UFC fight in pretty simple and easy fashion. Then who knows? I mean, the UFC will keep paying him. Dude keeps drawing. People don't care if he loses. So he'll be around as
yeah,
long as long as he wants to, and Dana, and he keeps bringing Dana them dollar bills. But he,
yeah.
if he hung him up today, I wouldn't be surprised. He's another weird one, but he's all over the place.
So we're about an hour and 15 minutes in, and we are just now starting starting wrestling.
Yeah.
and And I'll be honest with you, man, I really didn't think we'd go that long talking about boxing and MMA. Um, at least not like breaking down shows,
Well, we
you
get
know.
long, brother. You know how that goes.
Yeah. But so I guess since we already answered the questions of how we got interested, when we got interested, etc. I guess like the first thing to kind of jump right into it would be the state of the sport today, of professional wrestling.
My opinion is it's in a wonderful spot. I don't know if it's in the same spot it was in the '90s for sure, but we have two viable companies where people can go, which we didn't have for a long time, unless they wanted to maybe go to like Japan. But even then, but to have the WWE and AEW both thriving and being again like viable options for guys is fantastic. I think we were probably in a slightly better spot even a year ago because ROH closed down. The pandemic got made everything very weird where the indies have come back, but they're probably not thriving exactly how they should be. And then New Japan is not even running shows currently because of what's going on over there with the pandemic. But I think overall, I think we're in one of the better eras. I mean, the in-ring product is great if you're just looking at things like that and not worried so much about the business side. I think the in-ring product is fantastic in all companies. The talent's great, and like I said, to even have two companies where guys can go and make a career and be successful, that are on a national television station is not really something that we had seen since WCW was around. I mean, TNA obviously was on Spike for a while, but TNA's TNA. So honestly, I think currently, we're in a fantastic era of professional wrestling, and we all clearly benefit from it because it's just great. Everything's great. Even the
Yeah.
WWE, when they do things that I watch, because obviously, like for this, I've been getting more into the product. I was detached for a little while. Even the bad stuff, it's like, man, sometimes it sucks, but it's still wrestling, and the talent, the matches are still fantastic, and there's at least going to be a handful of things on the show that are going to be good. So I think we're in a really wonderful era.
I do too. Um, and I'll start off by saying that wrestling's popularity will never be what it was in the 90s.
No, I don't
Never.
either.
Um, you know, and I don't know exactly why that is. Maybe the culture of our society has changed so much, um, that I don't think that wrestling could put on a product on TV to where that many people are going to sit around a TV and watch it ever again. But that's not why I liked wrestling. And I always argue with people that I think that the 2002 to 2007 era of wrestling was better than the 1998 to 2001 era of wrestling.
Right.
Just because of why I like wrestling. Um, I will agree with you. I think it is a great, I think it is great where it is. Um, but I think it could, I, th- it's hard not to mention how great it could be if if WWE wasn't doing whatever it is that they're doing, with budget cuts. Um, since last year, WWE's budget cuts have been 96 wrestlers, coaches, and staff, and 23 backstage and other. Um, that's a lot of people who they've put out of work. Um, and when I did budget cuts and quotations, it's hard to talk about budget cuts when you've got a company that's reported their greatest earnings ever, because obviously that's what you want to see as a company. You want to see each new year your earnings be better than they were the year prior. So obviously WWE is still having record breaking earnings,
But in
but
in a pandemic, doing all that stuff too, it's just rough.
yeah. So like it's hard to be excited about it. It's hard to see guys get released and be like, okay, I'm watching a great product be put on a AEW, and a really good product being put on Impact, because let's clarify, Impact is way better. Impact is 1,000 times better than it was when it was TNA.
Right.
Um, and it doesn't get the credit it deserves. You still have Japan. You've got all types of different, indie wrestling that have built such great momentum that they're on YouTube, and they're on different streaming services. So there's enough product out there for us all to see. And when you see guys get released from WWE, and you're like, man, like, what could that guy have done if we weren't doing these budget cuts? So, um, I agree. It's super exciting to be a wrestling fan, just because of all the great wrestling we are getting. Even WWE, you know, granted, I'm very critical of them. Still watch it. Um, you know, Edge is putting on good matches. Seth Rollins is always a solid to put on good matches. Kevin Owens. Um, so yeah, I think the state of the
Man, I thought you were going to mention Brock. I thought you were going to mention Brock. I was going to get hyped.
Well, and so just a backstory on that. Brock was a huge complaint of mine, um, for 2015.
I just want anybody, if one person listens to this, I just want them to know right now that I don't condone anything that you're about to say. I'm all for Brock Lesnar.
So Brock was one of my biggest complaints about, and not Brock, because I like Brock. As Brock as a person, I love Brock Lesnar. He's got some phenomenal
You're talking
outlooks on.
about WWE character Brock Lesnar.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I hated what WWE did with him. Um, just because, okay, we're watching a scripted sport. Um, so so when somebody comes to me and they're like, "Yeah, but Brock's a real fighter. They got to make him look like a real fighter." Like, stop. What? Like, the jig is up. Like, we know it's scripted. We know it's fake. So for Brock to squash somebody in 5 seconds, a main event tier guy, it didn't do anything for the product, because Brock would leave for 3 months and then come back. So your top guy gets squashed by Lesnar, and then Lesnar disappears, and then you expect us to follow that top guy that just got his ass stomped by Brock Lesnar. That's not on Brock Lesnar. That's on WWE's terrible booking, which I think we all can agree that WWE couldn't book uh they couldn't book a thing. Um so so
Again,
every single time Lesnar
I want
showed
people
up,
to know that I don't condone any of this.
so anytime Lesnar showed up, I was just like, "Oh God, here we go. Here's Lesnar. Lesnar's gonna
Like,
like,
oh God, here we go. Yes.
yeah." But I will say, when Lesnar came back, at SummerSlam, I wasn't watching the product like a lot. I was seeing a lot of clips of it, and it took me a couple weeks to be like, man, Brock is kind of cool.
Brock,
Um,
sweet dude. This
I
iteration
love
of
the
Brock is pretty sweet.
Yeah, I love the hairstyle. I've always loved Brock's beard. In fact, Brock Lesnar is the reason why I've always wanted to grow a beard. He did this UFC press conference one time, and he showed up with this big bushy beard. And one of the interview guys said, "Brock, what's up with the beard?" And he goes, "It's hunting season." And I was just like, I remember seeing that, and I was just like, that is the coolest fucking thing I've ever seen and
Brock,
ever
Brock,
heard.
Brock personally to me has always kind of been the man. Like
Yeah,
And the thing for me is like I kind of feel the opposite. Like I do feel like that they should book him like a real dude because he was the UFC champion. To me,
Yeah.
that's different. Like if it was just some guy with like a background where he was like he trained a lot in like jujitsu, it's like okay, like that's cool, and I think they should also lean into that. I'm a big proponent of that. But like if you wanted to do some different stuff with him, fine. But like Brock was a real dude, so like I think them bringing him in and having him whoop people to me was like that makes sense. And obviously, like they don't. To me, like he would leave for 3 months or whatever because I think that they knew that he was a big star and they didn't want to oversaturate the character. So he leaves. They bring him back every now and then. He gets the big pop. Does the big business for him because as much as some people like don't want to believe it, like Brock is a big draw for the company when in an era where again like we don't have a ton of massive draws.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, absolutely.
and I just think that I think that I think if like some of his matches to me were always structured in a way to where he would put the guys over in a very unique, different type of way because he would have like 7-minute matches, but in between those 7 minutes, there would be pretty decent chunks of them where he get tossed around and dude would bump his ass off. Like he would do it for AJ, he'd do it for Balor. But then you also have some moments where it's like they're booking Brock against like Goldberg, and it's like, yeah, I didn't care about that. But I don't know. So to me, it was kind of the opposite. Like I kind of felt like he was always booked like the way he probably should have been. But there also is a part of me that like I get the complaint. Like if you're tired of Brock or you're even kind of out on Brock, and then every time he comes back, he just like wins the belt from somebody. Like I get why people would be like, "Hey, this sucks."
Yeah. And like and that's just kind of like me reverting back to the point of it's not that I hated Brock, it's I hated the way WWE booked him
Right.
because because I don't have a problem with Brock winning the title and disappearing for 3 months. I know Austin, Heyman, and a lot of people made the argument that hey, when when Lesnar does that, it makes the championship more prestigious because if he's taking the title and he's only coming around, it just adds more glorification to the title. Okay, that's fine. So in those 3 months that he's not around, let's showcase the Intercontinental Championship and let's showcase the United States Championship. Let's let those guys.
They got it. Sometimes they just don't do a very good job of building up like challengers.
Yeah, and that was the thing was okay, if Lesnar's going to be gone with the World Championship for 3 or 4 months, then I want to see the Intercontinental Champion main event a show. I want to see them, I want to see them propelled and shined on more, and they didn't do that. They tried it, but you can't take a championship that you've shit on for the prior year and a half and then go, oh, hey, now this is a prestigious championship again. Let's push it in the main event. Like, that's just not how that works.
Well, and I'm curious too if you feel this way about I think sometimes too because again the WWE was the only one in town for so long and they have programmed people in such a way to believe like for example like nobody believes when someone has a retirement match that they're gonna retire. And then granted that's a wrestling thing, but like WWE like breaks stipulations all the time. Like like when someone has like a loser leaves town match, like they come back in like a couple months. Like it's not real. And that's like for example, like then you have like AEW come along and they're trying to get people to believe in these types of things again, that stipulations are real. Like Cody losing the match against Jericho and never being able to challenge for the title again, everyone just assumed like, well, that's not real. Like he's going to be the champion at some point. And so far that hasn't happened. But like people are so programmed because WWE have programmed us so much because they were the only product a lot of us were watching. So we got so stuck in that I'm curious if that's why some people would get fed up when Brock would win the belt and then not defend it for like 3 months or be a champion for like a really long time. And Heyman's out there saying like, well, it makes the title more prestigious. I do believe that, but I just think a lot of these fans aren't like used to that. So when it happens, they're like, what's happened? Like, what is going on? Like, why isn't the champion on my show every week? When like in a lot of companies or even WWE, they didn't do that with Hogan all the time. Hogan would be champion for year, 2 year long stretches or whatever, and he would only defend the belt like 3 times a year, only on like big shows.
Yeah.
And so it's happened, but like now they've programmed it so much, especially in the 90s. The 90s got so bad with like guys would win the title one week, they'd lose it the next week, and then someone else would win it, and they were just like flipping it around, and it really like it didn't matter. The title really didn't matter. So I'm curious if like, do you think that maybe like that's also kind of played a factor into like why you disliked like him winning the belt and being gone for that long? Because we like at the time before AEW came around, we just kind of weren't used to that.
No, I mean it had to, it wasn't that I was programmed to think like, hey, the champion needs to be on the show every week, or hey, the belt needs to be defended at a pay-per-view. It was just, you know, like and WWE has openly admitted to us, and they did 15 years ago, like, hey, we're not going to give out big matches on all of our pay-per-views, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me because if you pay $60 or $70 for a pay-per-view, I expect to see just as good of a product in February as I do in March or in October as I did in August. Um, so when WWE, openly tells us the fans that and says, "Oh, hey, by the way, we're also not going to give you our world champion." That's fine, but I want an intercontinental championship match like Ziggler and Miz were doing in the fall of 2017. I want good intercontinental championship matches or good United States title matches main eventing those pay-per-views. If you're not gonna give me a world champion, and
Yeah,
that's just how I felt about it.
you still need marquee feuds.
Yeah,
And sometimes they do. And, I think a lot of companies sometimes can fall into some lulls like this with the mid card. I think they have issues building those things up and making you feel like they're important and giving you
yeah,
like quality storylines. And WWE does that for sure. AEW has done that every now and then. There's sometimes they have some mid card stuff that's great. And then there are times when it's like, like this could have used a little bit more stuff. But WWE does that too. And yeah, if your champion's not going to be around, then yeah, you got to have something.
yeah. So I mean, like that was my biggest complaint about Brock in the 2016 2017 years was okay if
2022, brother, and he's rocking and a rolling for you.
yeah, like I said, man, when he came back at SummerSlam, I wasn't watching. I saw the comeback, I saw the video online, and started paying attention to the videos I was seeing on Facebook of him coming out. And dude, I love the Goro Mortal Kombat haircut
Hair.
and the beard and just
If you,
funny.
when you couple all that stuff with like just the like I just don't give a shit type of attitude. Not that he gives the impression he doesn't give a shit, but it's like he just doesn't have really that much like he just doesn't feel threatened by any opponent. Like
Yeah,
the whole build that that for him and Lashley is just like Lashley's like this dude isn't taking any of this serious and I'm taking it super serious and Lesnar is just kind of like yeah man because like I crush everybody. Why wouldn't I crush you too?
and it's
Like
been the most entertaining stuff I've seen from Lesnar. Um, and kind of talking about before, Lesnar doesn't need the championship to be
no,
a draw.
he doesn't.
Um, you know, I there's the wrestling purist of me who wants to see good, awesome matches. And then there's the entertaining side that's like, hey, I want to see that match because it'll be entertaining. Um, you know, I I thought I thought Triple H and Sting at WrestleMania 31 was cool when they brought DX and the NWO out, even though the NWO made no sense for Sting. It
Makes
still was cool. It
Yeah.
was it was still a cool thing to see.
It was
Like, oh man, like that's
it's like a moment, but like in hindsight, it's like
yeah.
that didn't really make a lot of sense, huh?
It didn't make no sense. But you know, Lesnar and Goldberg. I loved the idea of Lesnar and Goldberg. And if you want to put it in a marquee match at WrestleMania, fantastic. It doesn't need the championship. And I thought that was stupid, and it was one of the things that made me hate, not hate Lesnar, but a lot of my hate was drawn towards Lesnar, because it was like, why is this guy fight? Why are these two guys fighting for the undisputed title when neither one of them are going to be on Raw tomorrow night?
That was when Goldberg beat Owens, right, to win the
Yeah,
belt, and
yeah,
they did that. I hated that too. I
yeah.
hated ending Owens' reign like that. I thought his reign was really good and really quality, and then they just kind of and yeah,
He did.
in particular did not, in my view, need the belt, and they put the belt in it, and I didn't see a point. I think was that also the same year that Owens and Jericho had the
Yeah,
match? 'Cause Jericho, that's how he got interrupted, right? Jericho's
yeah,
music hit. That should have been for the title.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know how
Uh,
about WrestleMania 30, whatever, but
so
yeah,
we've talked about the state of the sport today. And we can wholeheartedly agree that it's probably in the best position it's been in years.
it's definitely
Um,
a lot than it was like 5 years ago.
Absolutely. And so WWE's budget cuts. I know we talked a little bit about that. Just to kind of keep that going, because obviously that's been a big, huge story of 2022 and 2021. Like I said, 96 wrestlers, coaches, and staff, and 23 backstage personalities. Um, what do you think the reason for the budget cuts are?
I think it's all about the bottom line. I think that they're trying to. They always do it. At least I know that at least a couple of them have. They've always done it kind of in a weird, at a weird time where that the quarterly reports are coming out, so they can show investors that, hey, look, we have this. We've made this much money, and it doesn't show up that they're paying Bray Wyatt 1 point whatever $1 million a year because they cut him, and it just looks better for the investors. I think that they do it for those reasons. Um, I think some of them are. I think this last batch was for almost like a same reason, but I think it also had other reasons. I think a lot of it had to do with like the old way of NXT. Um, but I think for the most part, it's all about the bottom line and then making record profits, and that's it. Because if they really wanted to cut guys that they just thought like, oh, whatever, we're not using this guy, we want to cut him, then why wouldn't they cut Brian Kendrick? Makes no sense. Why wouldn't they cut Ali, who they haven't used in like 2 months? Like,
Yeah. So obviously you and I both, we are subscribers to Fightful Select. We both pay attention to Sean Ross Sapp. Um, and you know, I said it, I said it, before I knew Sean Ross said it, and that was when companies want to sell, they start liquidating assets that they have no use for at all. And when I see 96 wrestlers released, that tells me you never had, or that you didn't have any hope to use them. You didn't want to use them, and it's going to look really good when you're appealing to be bought by, whether it's ESPN, Fox, NBC, no matter who the buyer is. But I think in the next 2 to 3 years, I think WWE is going to sell. Um, and just kind of piggybacking off of that, do you think the company will look different in 2 or 3 years?
I think it'll look different for sure. Um, I'm in the mode of if it sold, I wouldn't be super surprised. It wouldn't like shock me just because the rumors have been swirling. But like, there is a part of me that like I can't help but to be like, if it were to happen, to be at least a little shocked. I guess I not again not fully because we kind of know like it's in the ether. It's not like this is coming out of left field if it were to happen.
No, that I mean that's what gives.
It's so insane to think that Vince would give it up. But it's only because again we're programmed to only know that world with him at the helm. So I don't know. It's just, and there's been quotes which you can always take them with a grain of salt or whatever. But I know that Nick Khan came out recently and said that we're not selling. Like, I don't know where this is coming from, but like it's pretty clear where it's coming from. Like, they've released a lot of dudes during a
Yeah.
pandemic, and then like you've also had the McMahons like give up stock and stuff. Like, there's different, there's stuff going on for sure, but at the same time, like, it's one of those things that like it's just so hard to wrap my brain around Vince not being in control that I'll kind of believe it when I see it.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, we know these things from looking at past business acquisitions. Um, you know, they say it's a budget cut. So here's what we're doing. We have all of this. We have the WWE trademark. We have the WWE content library, which we know includes years, decades of other companies' content.
WCW
And
there, I think,
yeah,
isn't Evolves in there.
AWA,
Yeah, all that stuff.
yeah, all the stuff that was on the network that you could go back, you can still watch on Peacock now. The content is there.
They could at some point even include ROH stuff if they were to
Yeah.
buy them. If it's available,
So
we don't even know that.
so that's what's appealing to somebody like ESPN, Fox, NBC. What's not appealing is having to run a wrestling company when you've never ran a wrestling company before. So, in order to take care of that, you get rid of a lot of stuff that you don't plan on using. Call it a budget cut to liquidate assets. So then the thing that is most appealing for somebody to buy, the content, doesn't come with the maintenance of running a wrestling company, a big wrestling company. Um, so these are things that companies do, businesses have done in the past. That's why everybody looks at it and goes, okay, you can say you're not looking to sell, but your actions say otherwise. Plus, we know that before COVID hit, they were looking to strike a deal. They were like in the final stages of striking a deal to sell. They've wanted to sell for a past few years. So acting like all of a sudden, hey, we're not going to sell, but we're liquidating all these things, just says, you know, that they're just trying to get their shareholders to believe something else. And like you said, the biggest main factor is when the owner's daughter, who is a part of the company, and her husband are a part of the company, and they sell their shares or the majority of their shares. That's a huge red flag too. Um, and some of it has to be like them letting their contracts expire, like talent wise, um, and not paying attention to it.
Yeah, the
Um,
whole thing was very weird. It still
like
makes sense to me. But Cole
yeah,
didn't even know.
yeah, Adam Cole and Daniel Bryan. Like I know Adam Cole for sure. I can't remember if
The
exactly.
thing about Brian, they actually pushed super hard to get him to stay.
Yeah,
The stuff that I had read was, I mean, obviously there was the weird, which is like a blip on the radar now, but it got real weird for like a week that they were trying to strike that deal with New Japan. And most think that that was only to appease Brian because he wants to do stuff over there, and that's always been like a dream of his, and they knew that AEW could offer that.
yeah,
Which was like, again, it was such like a weird thing when that got announced, because all of a sudden it was like WWE's trying to strike a deal with New Japan, which would have affected everybody else. I mean, because there's no way that they would have allowed them to also still work with Impact, also still work with AEW or whatever. But so the Bryan thing, I know that from what I've read, that they tried really, really, really hard to get him to stay, and it wasn't until pretty not super late in the game, but they were pretty confident he was coming back. Like, from what I had read, is they actually had long-term plans written out for him, because they were like, he's coming back. It's just a matter of when. And they had things ready to go, and then all of a sudden it kind of came down the pike that he's actually probably going elsewhere.
Yeah. And, just to kind of take a step back and go back to the budget cut thing, when you've got wrestlers who are asking for their releases and you're not giving it to them. You mentioned earlier about Brian Kendrick. Brian Kendrick hasn't wrestled on TV since October of 2020.
I didn't
They've
even know he was
had,
still with the company until I saw that report the other day.
yeah. And he's asked for his release, and they've denied him his release. Same thing with Mustafa Ali. They've denied him his release. So, if you're telling us that these are just about budget cuts, um, and guys are asking for their release, it's kind of contradictory. Wouldn't you say? I mean, if I worked for you and, if everybody in our group chat worked for Seth and Seth fired 5 of us for budget reasons, and I came to you and said, "Hey, I want to leave," and you said, "Nah, I'm not going to let you." That's kind of contradictory, right? Especially when you're not using me. If you don't put me on the schedule and you don't use me, and I ask for my release, you don't give it to me. It just doesn't fit with the narrative of it's a budget cut.
Especially when they have now. I mean, not everybody that they released were just guys they weren't even using. Like Braun was being used, Bray was being used. I mean, Bray had been kind of off and on at television at that point, but he had just had a WrestleMania match.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't that long after that he got released. So it's not like that they're just, which, those they could always point to like, well, they were making huge money and maybe they thought it wasn't worth it. But Bray was like either their number one or like very close to their number one, like merch seller. He was making bank for that company and they
Yeah.
still released him. So, yeah, I think it definitely contradicts itself. The Mustafa Ali thing's kind of weird too, because, there's the stories of him and Vince getting into it because Vince had allegedly pitched him some sort of idea that we don't know what it is at this point, but it had made him very upset. They had gotten into an argument, and basically Mustafa Ali hasn't really been on television since. Because in the report, which we've both seen, that basically he was only supposed to be given a week off for paternity leave, and then he's been gone for weeks, and so people just thought he had asked for more time, and that may not even be the case. So the Mustafa Ali thing's kind of strange. And I don't know if they see something in him that maybe they just haven't really like put out on television yet, because it really seems like they kind of don't. Even though I've read things that a bunch of wrestlers that work for that company want to work with him. And they think he's very good.
Yeah.
And
Mustafa Ali is excellent. He's phenomenal.
but maybe
And
sometimes that doesn't even matter with Vince.
yeah, of course, we've seen, you know, you and I have watched guys come from 205 live into AEW, and I'm like, this guy's awesome. And you're like, yeah, I haven't seen much of him. Yeah, you
Look at
didn't see much of him because WWE didn't showcase him.
look at Pac. I mean, even look at Daniel Bryan. I mean, he eventually got a big push or whatever, but
Yeah,
it took a while. I mean, even
yeah,
Punk, when they finally made Punk champion, Punk was still on every pay-per-view, he's still wrestling in the middle of the show.
yeah. And Mustafa Ali, I know you've read it as well. The the Money in the Bank ladder match that Lesnar just showed up and climbed up the ladder and grabbed the briefcase. The
I still don't.
original, yeah, the original idea was Mustafa Ali was supposed to win that. So obviously somebody in the company saw something in Mustafa Ali to say, yeah, we're going to make him Money in the Bank champ or Money in the Bank winner.
Right.
And obviously changed it last minute, whatever. Last minute changes down to the 30-second time slot is something that they do quite a bit over at WWE. But so obviously there was something there. Now, obviously that was a few years ago, but there was still something that WWE saw in Mustafa Ali to say, okay, we're going to make him Money in the Bank winner, which eventually he'll compete for a title. And they never did it. They never reverted back to it for whatever reason.
Unless you're
Um,
Otis.
Yeah.
Otis, he never challenged for the belt, did he?
No,
He
he
just,
lost.
just
He
lost.
lost the briefcase to Miz, who won the belt for a week or 2 weeks, and then lost and
He
then
lost
dropped it to Lashley.
Yeah, I lost it right back. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, that's right.
So, uh, I like just kind of transitioning into our next bullet point on wrestling. Um, the dissection of the NXT Black and Gold. I know Mustafa Ali didn't come from NXT. He was a 205 live guy, um, but kind of like guys like Mustafa Ali who were extremely talented, not big. Um, kind of like what they had in NXT Black and Gold, that they've dubbed it. Um, is is kind of pushing him to the side, kind of that idea of hey, we're not going towards that anymore. We're sticking more to what we like, what Vince and Bruce likes, more than what the the prototype that Mustafa Ali and NXT Black and Gold was, with the Adam Coles, uh, the Mustafa Ali's, the Cedric Alexander's.
Gargano was probably doomed. Well, who knows? Maybe he goes back, but like he was doomed to be there. Champ has wrestled a little bit lately on like dark matches and stuff on the main show, but
He went back to NXT 2.0 to
okay, saw
back
that.
up Braun Breaker.
Yeah. Um, I think with the NXT stuff, I think they're basically just going back to what Vince thinks sells, which is big guys. You don't even
Yeah.
necessarily have to be a wrestler. You just have to be an athlete, and you have to be big, and you have to have a big physique, and you have to be taller, and that's what he thinks works. Now, the silly thing is that the prime example is that AEW is a viable company who are drawing very good ratings and are challenging them in the 18 to 49 demo, and actually have beaten them a couple times in their against Raw, and they do it with smaller guys, and it seems to be working just fine. Um, but I also just think that Vince thinks, and sort of it kind of is, to be honest. I mean, as great as it was and as much as we liked it, I think he views NXT as kind of a failure because NXT was put on national television to directly compete and beat and hurt AEW, and they didn't do that. They only won 1 week in the demo or in the whatever it was, and it was a show headlined by Cole. Tony Khan has said that, and now Cole's in the other company. So I think he sees it as a failure. I mean, people tend to not look at things properly all the time sometimes, people in the Twitter sphere and all that shit. But NXT was moved there to directly compete with AEW, and they even put them 2 weeks ahead of when AEW debuted to make it seem like they were there first. And they weren't. And since they did all this stuff and put everything up against AEW with one goal to beat them, and they didn't do it, and they failed, and AEW beat NXT and basically virtually made them move to a completely different night because that's the only reason it's on Tuesdays. I think Vince sees it as, okay, well, that didn't work. Also, the whole idea, even before AEW came to, was that, ironically, Triple H had seen the success of ROH and what they were doing with the Bucks and Cody and all that stuff, and he came up with the idea that we could do that here with NXT and basically focus on similar talent or ROH talent, which is the case with some of these guys. I mean, he brought over Cole, and all those guys were from the ROH stuff, and we could basically do that here, but with WWE backing. And they even had gone as far as to run some of the exact same arenas that ROH had ran. And actually, like, sometimes their biggest competition for NXT was ROH before it was AEW. And he had taken all that stuff and came up with this idea and had basically changed, hey, we're going to do things different here. And we're going to focus on the developmental talent here. And then AEW came about and they became direct competition because Vince saw them as a way to hurt them. And again, they lost. So now I think we're to the point where Vince is like, okay, well, that didn't work. So now we got to change it. And I think that also goes into, I mentioned earlier about how the last round of budget cuts I thought was a little different. Well, they got rid of a lot of Triple H's guys.
Yep.
So I think he's scrubbing the slate completely clean and really, really, really just starting over with this new version. Even though there are some leftovers still there, but they're not huge focuses, and clearly they're going in a completely different direction. And I think that's the main reason why they tore it all down. And they tore it all down. It's not even so much that they tore it down necessarily, and they went with this big guy mentality because that's Vince. I mean, we all know that. It's the fact that they did it so fast.
Yeah.
Now it's just gone.
Yeah, there's nothing left. There is a few guys. They're doing the Dusty Cup. That's interesting. Ciampa's still there, but other than that, I mean, it is they have completely dissected the black and gold version of NXT. And I read this article, and I don't remember who the article was from because I'd love to credit them, but I'll post it on Twitter later. But the article that mentioned about like Hunter's give a damn, like when NXT lost to AEW, there was a guy had mentioned hey, like maybe Vince sat Triple H down and said, hey, you're done and it's over, because it wasn't until after that Hunter took time off. And they interviewed Sean Ross Sapp interviewed Shawn Michaels, and Sean said that Hunter has been spending a lot of time at home with his kids, being a dad, stuff like that. He sold those shares. Now, of course, the other guys, his wife and Vince and Shane and all them sold their shares, sold a lot of their shares, not all of them, but a lot of their shares in WWE. But, Hunter just kind of has taken a step back because I think maybe he knew like, hey, like this is over. Um, maybe he agrees with it, maybe he doesn't. Who knows? But I just thought that was interesting that they pointed all that stuff out. That hey, like he's spending more time at home, he's doing more of this, and he's kind of slowly letting go of Triple H and becoming more of Paul Levesque.
I'm curious if he's also kind of realizing too that like I'm sure he had at least like a feeling at some point, probably for a long period of time, that at some point like I'm going to be running the big ship.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of curious if he feels now after what happened and Vince sees that what he was working with, like in his eyes, didn't work. That maybe that's also why he's trying to detach a little bit. Maybe he just realizes like, hey, this isn't going to happen.
Yeah. No, I mean, obviously we don't know. We'll never know, but I mean, you can look at certain things and be like, yeah, I could see that. And most definitely, I 1,000% agree with you. I think when Vince announced that, when Vince demoted him, and then Vince announced that he was bringing in Nick Khan, I think that was kind of like Triple H's eye-opening moment where he's like, okay, maybe I'm not going to be at the head of the table in 10 or 15 years. So, and then he was like, okay, I'm going to revert all my effort and my focus to NXT and do what I can there. And then when they pulled that out from under him, he's just kind of like, all right, I'm going to go be Paul Levesque.
It could be.
I'm going to go be a husband, and I'm going to go be a dad, and
well, especially if he had that heart scare, which I don't think anyone knows like a ton of details about. I saw that it may have been like a pretty, some people think it may have been a bigger issue than was kind of let on. And if that was the case, then obviously like maybe kind of, slowing down and
I mean, like I said, we don't know, but I can tell you that things like that will open your eyes. I mean, knock on wood, life can end at any moment, and when you have something that kills a lot of people, a stroke, a heart attack, and you survive from it, you you do a little bit of soul searching and say, okay, what am I doing and what do I want to do? So that probably has a lot to do with him spending a lot of time at home. Like I said, we don't know. We can make assumptions. Um, I will tell you that one of Triple H's biggest projects in NXT, him and Sean were, because Sean was helping run NXT UK, Triple H was running NXT Black and Gold. One of their biggest projects and one of their biggest things that they were proud of was Walter.
The artist
And
known as.
and Walter has made quite the buzz lately. Um, so for those that don't know, if you've been living under a rock, Walter was rebranded as Gunther, and the trademark
You gotta say it right. It's as Gunther.
Gunther, yeah. Um, and the name that was originally trademarked was traced back to a fighter pilot by the name of Gunther something something,
Stark. I
whatever.
think his last name was Stark.
Yeah, Gunther Stark, who was a Nazi pilot back in the World War,
Big guy.
which doesn't bode well for the look that WWE was going for, because Gunther is Austrian, and
It
uh,
makes no sense.
huh?
It makes zero. It makes the whole thing is frustrating.
So and I'm gonna connect this conversation to a couple, or to the conversations that we've had just a few minutes ago. So they they rebrand him, but the original trademark was for Gunther Stark. Gunther Stark, Nazi pilot, World War II. Uh, Walter is Austrian. Adolf Hitler was Austrian. So
Yeah.
it's not a good look for a big Austrian to walk around on TV with the name of a Nazi pilot. I know I've seen on listen, guy, if you think like the wrestling community on Twitter is wild, well, wait till you join TikTok. I mean, it is nuts. Um, I've seen guys, I've watched guys that are like, I'm a third African American, and I can tell you that you guys are all reaching when you say that there was any connection here uh, between a Nazi and Walter. Like, yeah, oh, we get that. I don't think anybody in the company did it on purpose, but when I look back at what we talked about with WWE letting contracts expire, you know, they let Big Show's contract expire. They let Adam Cole's contract expire. You know, Big Show's not a big deal, but Adam Cole, like, they didn't even know. Nobody in the company, like, it was just brought up, like, oh, hey, like, Adam Cole's contract's expiring in days, and they were like, oh shit, like maybe we should try and do something to rework this. Um, the lack of communication, the lack of leadership, the lack of, like, this is $1 billion company, and you're telling me that nobody on that legal team that works with the federal government on copyrights said, "Oh, hey, by the way, Gunther Stark is a Nazi. We probably shouldn't. We
All
probably
it
shouldn't
was like a
trademark that name."
Google search.
Yeah.
That was it.
Now, yeah, a Google search. I mean, you know, and I joked about it in our chat on Messenger about uh how now, we're talking about the same company that when they first brought Heidenreich in, they wanted Heidenreich to be a frozen Nazi soldier, super soldier, who was on unthawed years later. Um, and it's actually,
Supposedly, whoever brought that up to Vince too, like even Vince was like, "What the fuck, pal?"
yeah,
Like,
and Vince fired him. And funny, it was funny. I read that uh, this was on Sean Ross Sapp. He mentioned that guy, as soon as he brought that idea to Vince, Vince was like, "That's horrible. You're fired." And then a few years later, WWE worked with him because that guy wrote "See No Evil" that starred Kane.
that's hilarious. That's nuts.
um, so like I said, just to kind of connect the Walter and Gunther thing, and it's just weird how they did it. Like, if you're gonna bring Walter from NXT to Raw or SmackDown and change his name, fine. But he won the match
Dumb.
and then grabbed the microphone and
Dumb.
yeah,
Just don't
like
do it.
just grabbed the microphone and was like, the winner of the match is Gunther. Okay, well
Well,
that's
did you see that this week he explained why he changed his name?
yes. And did you notice that they did the promo in German? Uh,
They did. Honestly, like it was kind of a good promo. Like it was kind of good. I kind
it
of like,
was,
but like the explanation's dumb.
yeah,
It's like, oh, I was named after my grandfather and blah blah blah, and now I need like a new, I need like a fresh start, so I'm changing my name. Who the
yeah,
fuck was that? You know, anyone needed a fresh start and fucking changed their name, like completely. It makes no
yeah.
sense. It makes no sense. It's stupid. It feels like they're trying to patch over something when they just shouldn't have done it, or at least come up with like a different name. But they're like, fuck, we already trademarked it. Like, what are we gonna do? It's like, well, just call him only Gunther then. That's dumb. Just call him Walter. Why can't we just call him Walter? I'm
Yep.
gonna call him Walter.
I am too. I have no intentions on calling him Gunther at all. Just because I don't even like the name Gunther. Uh,
No, Walter's better.
yeah, and Walter was hands down my. I love NXT UK. Absolutely
Just to
loved it.
prove how long-winded we are, I have to travel because I have to plug this in. Yeah. My laptop's currently dying, and now I have to move.
Yeah, man, I should have been able to tell. I should have been able to tell you that you'll need a charger for this type of thing.
That's right. We're good.
So for people who are going to listen to this, just to let you know, Seth is not the most technically advanced person. He's having trouble working. He's having trouble working a MacBook.
I didn't have trouble with this. It's just the charger's is in a different area of my apartment.
So, kind of moving off of WWE, because we've spent the whole time we've talked about wrestling, talking about WWE, and understandable, they're the biggest company. Did you watch Wrestle Kingdom?
I did. I didn't watch all the matches, but I watched the key ones. I didn't watch night 3. I think there's an issue with them doing 3 nights. It's too much. As interested as I kind of was with that whole night 3 stuff, I just at that point it was like that whole week was kind of nuts. It was like a lot of wrestling that whole week, and having that around the same time, which is no fault of their own. I mean, it's a different country or whatever, and they don't care. But like Dynamite was on stuff, so I never got around to watching night stuff on night 1 and 2.
Yeah, because I mean there was a big week that week. It was like Dynamite moving to TBS.
Yeah,
Um,
and then it was like, and then obviously like SmackDown was on Friday, Rampage is on, and I want to say there was like a UFC card or something, maybe like that
yeah,
Saturday. It was like something else, and it was just like it was so jam packed that it was just like, dude, like you got to get a break at some point.
yeah, and I did the same thing, like, because I remember because I bugged you about it last year, and then this year you were like, "Yo, have you watched Wrestle Kingdom?" And I was like, "Man, I have not." And you were like,
I jumped on it but that at that point, like I had some free time, and I jumped on it, at least watch like the main matches.
"Yeah." I thought it was overall a good show. I mean, obviously not their best one. Um, you know, uh, it was very different
I
to
think we
see.
hurt them really bad with some of their stuff, and I think the booking's not as good as it was like 3 years ago.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
and you could tell the pandemic has definitely taken its toll on what they're doing over there. So, um,
it was quality though. Like I mean, they don't, the top matches
oh,
were good.
oh, hands down. They're I mean, yeah, the top matches weren't as good as what they usually are, but I mean, they were still good matches.
I think probably Okada Osprey from night 2 is probably going to be. It's so early in the year, though. I mean, you don't know what's to come, but like I assume that'll probably be up for like match of the year. I think Okada and Shingo could be up for match of the year. Although that was a little. It depends on what your preference is. I think Shingo, honestly, I think he's in the conversation for best wrestler in the world. I think he's fantastic. And that match was a little bit of a slow build, but once it picked up, it was pretty great. And then Okada Osprey was just like a sprint from beginning to end, and there was a lot of pretty innovative moves. The one that I think sticks out to me is Okada going for the Rainmaker, and he flipped it into a Spanish Fly.
Yep.
Which was absolutely insane. So I think like those are clearly like the highlights. And then, I thought for me, I thought the Tanahashi Kenta match was really good. I thought the finish was fantastic. There were moments in that match though, where it was like, clearly these guys they don't do these matches a lot over there. So it's like, it's hard to, it took them forever to like set up ladders and stuff like that. So there was like some lulls in the match, but overall it was really good. Kenta getting fucking busted open and then getting put through that table, and then like him hitting and going down the table and like smearing the blood on the table was just like a pretty incredible visual. So it's like those 3 matches. I thought Sho and Yo was like fine. I thought it was pretty good, but like I thought it was going to be slightly better. And I think that was like mainly it. That were like the main highlights that I really, really remembered. There was a lot of like multi-man matches that are always like fun, but
yeah, they do a lot of the multi-man, like the gimmick matches that are kind of like comedic,
especially back-to-back nights, because they'll do things where like it's like a preview of what's to come.
Yeah. I like I said, I thought it was overall good. I mean, it wasn't as hyped as it was 2 or 3 years ago. Like you said, I believe a lot of that has to do with the pandemic. Um, I'm surprised that they're even still able to run a show, that they ran shows in the pandemic. I know we're kind of
now they're like shut down again for a little while.
Yeah.
I know they canceled like the remaining shows, I think, for the rest of the month. So
yeah. Kind of transition into ROH. ROH announced at the end of last year, or towards the end of last year, that they were filing for bankruptcy, and that they were going to be taking a break. And I've seen a lot of stuff. Like, are they? And I've just been so busy. Been so busy with my Chiefs podcast. Been busy with work. Been busy with family, the holidays, and then busy trying to catch up on WWE stuff for this podcast. Are they up and running?
They're not running. Final Battle, I think the date was like December 11th. I think that was the final show. What they're calling is a hiatus. I was researching stuff before. Obviously, we did this, and from my understanding is basically like what they're doing is they're not going to come back until April. And I believe their first show is the Super Card of Honor. I believe it's on April 1st. And the plan, at least from what I read, is that they're using basically like free agents to fill out their shows. I don't know really what that means. I don't know if they're still going to do like a weekly show, or are they just going to do like pay-per-view cards and try to have like, like bigger indie talent there. They're also scrapping all of their titles except their world title, their women's title, and the tag titles. And they gave all those guys, I'm assuming that like they probably have to still talk to because they kept the office in place. Like if the same people are still running the office, they're still going to book the shows. So they still clearly have plans to run. And I don't know how it works, but I know that their champions could basically defend the titles anywhere they want. They've given them permission to do that. And then I think with the caveat, like basically the deal is like say Jonathan Gresham like showed up on Dynamite and did whatever, and he's the world champion, and he was like, hey, I'm going to defend the ROH world title against whoever. We'll say like Orange Cassidy. He has that match. He wins, whatever. I think ROH then will get that match as part of like their library. Like AEW will too. But I think that that's like part of the thing. It's like it becomes also part of like their catalog. But I don't really know how that works either, because the last I had read was that it had been reported by Sports Illustrated that basically the ROH library was going to go up to the highest bidder. But at that time, which I haven't heard anything since, I want to say this was like back in like November maybe that I was reading this. I think it was in the Observer. Or no, I think it was Sean Ross Sapp that was actually reporting that AEW and WWE had claimed that they had no knowledge of it being available. So whether it is or isn't, I guess we don't really know. But yeah, basically, as far as I know right now, their plan is they're still going to run in April with the first on the 1st, and it's going to be. But the weird thing is I think what threw people off is everyone was curious when they announced this. It's like they're rebranding. So are they going to be called something completely different? Are they still going to be Ring of Honor? Are they still going to have like the same style of like rules? Like what are they doing?
Well, what caught
when they announced Supercard of Honor, though, it had the ROH logo.
Yeah, and when what caught my eye, obviously Jay Lethal shows up on AEW, and then you get Mike Bennett and Maria and the 3 or 4 other people show up on Impact, and they're actually carrying the Ring of Honor name. And then Ring of Honor announced that they're doing a Hall of Fame. And so I was like, okay, so if they're doing a Hall of Fame, are they already? Because usually, most of the time, like I said, in the business world, when a company files for bankruptcy, there's not a whole lot to come back from. Now, I'm not 100% sure if ROH did file for bankruptcy.
I don't think they did. I think what really killed them, because again, like in preparing for this specifically, what had really a lot of this started to hurt them a lot when obviously like the Bucks and Cody left.
Yeah.
And that really hurt them a lot because they were doing, for ROH, they were doing like record business. And honestly, like what's very odd about the whole thing is their actual peak actually came after their downfall started, which is really weird. But Cody and the Bucks had already left, but ROH's peak was probably when they sold out Madison Square Garden, but that was after they were already gone. But they had sold tickets when they were still there, and they didn't know that they weren't going to be there. They didn't know like what was really going on. I think they probably assumed like, well, if whatever happens, like we'll still work with them in some capacity. But then ROH got obviously upset about the All In thing, how it springboarded a lot of like the AEW stuff, and they had felt used. So, because I remember a lot of people when AEW started, they assumed like, well, they'll have a working relationship with Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
And they didn't, because Ring of Honor was very pissed. But basically, like that was the start, and they had lost like their big stars. I'd read that the Bucks actually, because they were doing so well there, that they had actually brokered the first, like the highest guaranteed contracts in ROH history, which they were both guaranteed 80 grand per year. Plus they were getting whatever they made in merchandise sales, which was huge. And so I know like all that stuff happened, and then they had lost like big stars.
I was going to say the speaking out movement knocked a couple of their guys out too.
Yeah, for sure. Lethal was one of them. But yeah, it had hurt some stuff. The Marty Scurll thing that happened a little bit later because he got put on. He got signed to a pretty big deal, and then he got put on as like head booker.
Yeah.
And then that happened, so they kind of had to remove him, and now he's not even with the company anymore.
Yeah.
But what really, really, really hurt them was the pandemic more than everyone else, because they had actually, and it's pretty sad, really, because they were like pretty much one of the only companies that actually ran safely. Like they had told everyone, hey, we're not coming back until it's safe. And so they didn't run shows. they still paid talent the entire time. They didn't cut anybody. And even talent that had agreed to, before the shutdown, had agreed to make appearances for them, they paid them. So they were basically losing money. And then on top of that, like, they weren't running any shows. And that really killed them. And they were the only ones who actually ran safe, while AEW and WWE got to run because Florida basically let them do whatever they wanted.
Yeah.
So they ran, even though AEW did tests, like they still
Essential business.
right, which is, you know, but yeah, so they got hurt really badly from that, and I think eventually they basically just decided, like, we're not viable anymore. We can't really do this during these times, and I think that's what really crushed them. So they made the decision to, whatever they're doing, rebrand, reimagine. I don't think anyone fully knows what is going to come in April. It could be something really cool. But also, like, it's another thing that kind of sucks because ROH, when we were talking about how good the business is doing currently, like, ROH was one of the options. It's not anymore. But and they also basically just released everybody, which is pretty crazy. But they basically just let everybody go and pretty much let them work wherever they wanted immediately. And that's why guys like Jay Lethal was showing up. That's why, like, I think Brody King could have, maybe. I'm not really sure about that because he didn't show up till after the year turned over. And like, the Briscoes were already doing stuff other places. So yeah, I mean, they basically just decided, hey, we're just going to let everybody go. And as far as I know, I think once they come back, it's just going to be like free agents and stuff, which could make the cards really thin. It could make them really, really good, depending on how it works. I mean, who knows? Maybe now, because it's a reimagined thing, maybe AEW is like, hey, you want John Moxley for a main event of this random card or whatever?
Well, and like, I think that speaks volumes about what Tony's doing over there, because Tony's not afraid to open a door and be like, hey, like, here's so and so, let me borrow so and so, as a kind of way to keep that interesting.
I think this too, that's a good way to keep your talent happy. I mean, let them do more, let them have more options, and let them do kind of whatever they want. I mean, obviously there's certainly some limitations, but
well, yeah, not just talent, but I mean, just fans in general. You know,
that's
I
what
mean,
we all really benefit from Tony basically being like a super fan.
yeah,
It's like, he's just like, hey, it would be sweet if we did this, and it's like, yeah, let's do it because it's cool.
Yeah, and that's a huge part of him being like a nerd, a wrestling nerd, is he kind of sees that same thing that we see and says, hey, like, I can do this. So, which brings me to our next point. AEW, their first 2 years, they have 4 shows, and they are fully loaded. How would you grade their first 2 years?
I'd say it's hard not to grade it like an A. I mean, I think that they had an absolutely insane run when they picked up Punk and Danielson, and like that whole, whatever that was, it was like that whole summer. It was like a 3-month stretch of, like, it felt like every show was just nuts. That was pretty crazy. I think them just being like a company that's making money is insane. Like, no one thought that was going to happen. The ratings have been a massive success. They got a brand new TV deal already that happened, whatever it was, like 4 months into their existence. I assume that the next TV deal is probably going to be pretty large. I mean, like, the NHL TV deal was very big, and the NHL doesn't draw absolutely terrific ratings. Seems like live sports just sell to these networks. So I assume that, but that's obviously not in the first couple of years like you asked, but I mean, that's probably on the horizon at some point. And then they signed some pretty massive dudes. I mean, they got Punk out of retirement. Danielson's a very big deal. Even getting Moxley at the very beginning. Their pay-per-view numbers have only gone up, and they've only, they broke records with the All Out pay-per-view, the last one. And before that, they had broken records with the Revolution one. So, and just the fact that they've established themselves as like a real threat in this weird world where there hasn't been a lot of threats in 20 years. I think it's hard not to grade it an A, even if you don't necessarily even like if you're just looking at it from like a business standpoint and don't even really like what they put on television. It's like, how could you not say that they're doing fantastic unless you're being disingenuous?
Yeah. And you're going to find a lot of that. And, you know, I, I've cracked on the other company. You know, and I've told myself, like, hey, when I do this, I don't want to be so one sided. But this is the first episode. This is introduction. This is me talking about, this is us talking about, like, hey, where we stand, what we like, what we don't like. And if I had to grade it, man, I'm grading it an A plus. Um, you know, I'll reiterate again and emphasize on the fact that I like storytelling. Um, whether it's no matter where it's at, whether it's in live sports, whether it's in wrestling, whether it's in, fighting, TV shows, no matter what it is, I love storytelling. And I feel like that I get a better payoff from a story that AEW has done than any other wrestling company. Um, that I know that if they start something, they're going to finish something. Um, you know, and if you've, I've listened to Tony and Conrad's podcast, and they've mentioned, the ideal match where they've talked to Cody before, and Cody, everybody talks about the ideal match length is 15 to 18 minutes, and they've been able to do that and make good matches that way and tell good stories. Um, you know, I don't feel like the talent goes wasted. Um, that's why I get hyped up when I see guys like Tony Nese and Leo Rush come to AEW, and it's like, some people will be like, "Oh, well, I saw them in WWE, and they weren't worth a damn." Well, you're wrong. They're worth a lot. You just didn't see what they were capable of over here, but you're gonna see what they're capable of
They're
on
giving
AEW.
freedom for sure.
Yeah, they're giving room to work. They're giving room. It's a breath of fresh air to see the talent taken care of, and let the talent do what they're supposed to do, and that's entertain us. Um, and I feel like AEW does that 10 times, 20 times better than the other company. And it's crazy, man. I'll wear my Kevin Owens shirt, or I'll wear so and so out in public. My Roman Reigns shirt, and I never used to get comments on it, man. But I'll tell you, I probably can count on two hands how many times recently I've gone out wearing a shirt, and they're like, "Oh, is that so and so from WWE? Have you checked out AEW?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, I have."
That's pretty.
So
And they're making waves for sure. Which again, like for us, being two dudes in our 30s or whatever, it feels like we're kind of kids again with this stuff. Like it's cool to that there's real like competition out there. And again, like
yeah,
I think the fact that AEW can even consider themselves like real competition, even though they claim that they're not, because they kind of aren't. Like they're kind of worrying about their own stuff. But in the reality of things, it's like there's still two wrestling companies, and no matter what, like the public eye is going to say that they're competition because of that. I mean,
yeah.
you can't go out and say like that that like this weekend you can't say that the Bengals and the Chiefs aren't competition, just even though there's two football teams in the same league.
Well, and I'll revert back to, like what we talked about, or what I mentioned earlier about, WWE coming out and saying, 10, 15 years ago, saying, "Hey, our pay-per-views, or my bad, sorry, premium live events as they're called now."
Well, that's what they
They,
call it now, but it's kind of weird because like I was watching whatever, SmackDown the other night, and Charlotte said pay per view.
well, Charlotte probably got a tongue lashing from Vince when she got behind the curtain back to
Or
Gorilla.
they it was Charlotte and they kind of let her do whatever. So
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Or because it was Charlotte, they kind of let her do whatever. Um, But the when they come out and say, "Hey, we have 4 big pay-per-views a year and we're going to provide our best matches on those 4 big pay-per-views." Even though the other 9 or 10 pay-per-views or premium live events cost the same as those big 4, that kind of, especially, for somebody who was paying adult money for those events, it sucks when they say that. And then you have AEW who's putting on pay-per-view caliber matches, more than one, on their weekly shows. And not just their weekly shows. They're doing it on their YouTube shows as well.
Yeah, they put
Um,
Suzuki on YouTube.
yeah.
It's
I
just
mean, so though that's extremely that just speaks volumes to me about where we're at with this. This company's 2 years old. They've got 4 shows. Yes, their roster may be a little overbloated. Um,
but I'm kind of
but
curious too if like because a lot of people have criticized like Tony signing a bunch of dudes, but like I'm kind of curious if like like a lot of people just don't really take into consideration that 3-year window is up and a lot of these people's contracts are going to run out. I mean, some of them are names that you kind of just are like, okay, like I can see why they're letting them go, but I wonder if he kind of knew, like, well, we're gonna, in some form or fashion, like we're gonna thin out a little bit
yeah,
here in the next few months, and like, also, it's just like insane. Some of it's insane. It's like, did you really wanted this man because he was like, hey, we can't take one more body, so sorry, I can't take Bryan Danielson. Like,
yeah,
what are we doing here?
yeah. Well, and it's like it's the memes that go over the internet with Dan. Um, I'm drawing a blank. The guy with his face painted.
Dan,
Yeah. When they signed him, there's a bunch of memes going around on the internet that like, hey, why don't you sign somebody that's not from WWE? And then they sign him, and everybody's like, well, we don't know him. You need to sign people that we know. So
right?
it's you know wrestling fans, and not just wrestling fans. Fans in general are
But
fickle.
it is super weird. Like that argument's always been super weird. Like
Yeah.
somebody's always from somewhere. Like,
Well, like I said, it's a
but do they not realize that like Adam Cole's from not from, he's from ROH,
yeah,
and like, he wasn't a WWE guy. He was at one point he was an ROH guy, and so was Bryan Danielson. So was Punk. Like it's just it's a pretty stupid argument. That's literally like telling your favorite sports team like, hey, don't sign that guy because like he played on another team.
yeah.
It's stupid. It
Well,
makes
like I said, people are fickle. I know a lot of people will say like wrestling fans. I'll just say people in general are fickle.
people in
Um,
general. The wrestling community is sometimes can be a special breed.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and we've seen it. Where people, and I was guilty of it when I was younger. When TNA very first popped up, I had a lot of people sitting here, telling me like how cool TNA is, and I just didn't want to watch it because I was so programmed, like you said, that WWE was the new it thing, and nothing could come along and tower them over. And as I alone by myself would watch TNA, I'd be like, man, like they've got some they got some really good stuff going. They got some really bad stuff going, but they got some really good stuff going. Um,
But it's okay. It's okay to have options and
yeah,
things to be different.
and I think that's what people, you know, uh, I think it's what the problem with people is, like because like I said, you get on TikTok, the wrestling community is really weird on there. It's like, uh, WWE guys will dog on AEW guys because AEW guys will be like, oh, AEW is the future. They're going to put WWE out of business. Now, that's just people talking. I mean, that's no different than me being like, hey, my sports team is better than your sports team. It's an opinion to bash AEW and not like AEW because some asshat said that AEW was going to put WWE out of business, and you don't think that's true. That's not really fair to AEW and the guys working for AEW. And you not wanting to go watch the product and support the product because you don't like what some asshat said on social media. It's silly to me.
Right.
Like you mentioned, like it's a fantastic time, regardless of budget cuts and guys being out of jobs and there not being enough TV time for these guys that are out of jobs. The business is in a phenomenal place because there is so much content out there. No matter
Yeah,
where you're watching it from.
I don't remember who said it. I think it might have even been Cody, like when everything first started. But it's just like, there's different flavors of ice cream, dude, and you don't have to like all of them. But it's
No.
good that there's options, and you can pick. And there's certain ones that sometimes I don't like. I wouldn't get every time, but sometimes you tune in and you're like, oh, this is pretty cool. And you watch it for a little while, and maybe you don't after that, or maybe you get attached to it or whatever. It's like, it's just, I never understood when options became like such a bad thing. They're just not.
No, this introduction, this getting to know us, I've kind of, shit on the big company, WWE a little bit. But I'm not going to say that there's nothing that they do that is appealing to me, that is entertaining to me. No, like I said, Edge has good matches. Seth is always, regardless of what you think about Seth Rollins, the person, Seth Rollins always has good matches. Kevin Owens has good matches.
The Roman Reigns is really good.
Yeah, Roman's new character, like it's crazy because like Roman's character that they've done now is the best work that Roman's ever done. And it's entertaining. Like it's who he's supposed to be. So I'm not, like I said, I'm not completely shitting on everything they do. I like what they do. It's just hard to support a company that that does some of the stuff they do behind backstage.
Right.
So interesting. I had if you're looking at our lineup, I had State of the Business with all the wrestling out there. Business is booming. But you and I have talked on the State of the Business enough. I wanted to I had a little side note for myself that I wanted to throw in there. So for those that don't know, Seth doesn't like it when I do hot takes. I am not going to do a hot take this week.
Just that they're super ridiculous.
Okay, but I'm not going to do my hot take.
I really kind of like it. I enjoy it because I just know it's going to be so fucking insane. But like, it's just I shit on it as like almost like a gimmick because sometimes it's pretty bad. But
yeah,
I don't know what you're about to say, but
well, and I will do more of my hot takes in the future. But
you should be prepared.
But this one I saw on TikTok from somebody, and I was like, man, like I thought maybe I could steal it and give it to you, and you would think it was mine. But I was like, no, I'll tell him that it's not mine. But
so, you believe it?
I don't believe it. I just thought it would be funny to talk about it. So there is this guy on TikTok that was like, hey, what if WWE is releasing all this talent and doing budget cuts so wrestlers can go be independent or they can go work for a different company, and WWE can open that forbidden door and invite guys to come in whenever they want, and they don't have to pay them because they're not contractually obligated to. They could pay them for the one event that they come work or the two events that they work. And and that wasn't like his theory. He was just saying like, WWE is probably doing that because WWE is cool like that. And so that's why
like whenever like people are like hardcore fans of whatever company, they're always like, well, yeah, because like everybody over there is like so nice. And it's like, nobody knows these fucking people. Like, you don't know these people, but it's like, they're always like, yeah, it's like, well, why wouldn't WWE do that? They've always been so great to everybody. And it's like, what are we talking about? That's not true. They're just not going to fucking do that. Like, no company does that. They're not just going to let guys go. The only time that ever happened in a similar fashion was with fucking Pillman, and it backfired. Like the people aren't going to do that again. Like WCW let him go with the intention of like, oh, he'll be back, and then he went to the WWF.
Yeah. So and this guy was super adamant that like that's what Nick Khan came in to do. Nick Khan came in to
Now you guys are best friends.
Huh?
And now you guys are best friends.
I have commented on a couple of people's you know, and I'll say, you know, as super critical as I am, I commented as my personal profile. And I was like, yeah, you know, whatever. I'm going to leave it alone. Now I'll listen to it. I'll giggle and I'll keep scrolling. And that's it. And that's what I did with this one. Cause this guy was like, Nick Khan knows what he's doing. And this is what he's doing. You guys don't understand. He's making it to where WWE doesn't have to spend money on these big fat contracts, and they can just pay guys to come in, and you're gonna see super matches that we've never seen before, like guys from New Japan coming in and fighting, and you know Okada and Styles can main event WrestleMania, and you guys just don't understand. And I'm like, all right. I was like, that sounds
like, or like if they wanted to do that, they could just do exactly what AEW is doing and just like put it in their contract that they can work other companies.
Yeah.
They don't do that.
So
get it together.
Like I said, I had that, you know, as a possibility to throw in there. I was like, man, maybe I'll throw that in there. And then, like I said, when you and I have talked about the state of the business all through our talking points. So there was no point in giving it its own time period. Figured I'd throw that at you and see if that reminded you of a chase.
If you would have just been like, hey, bro, here's my idea, I'd have been like, yeah, well, that's a Chase idea.
See, and that was my idea.
Some of these things I got to give you credit; they are ideas.
That was my idea. I was going to be like, man, I'm going to throw this at him, and I'm not going to tell him where I got it from, and make him think that it's my idea, and see if he can tell the difference.
That's a pretty bad one, though. It makes no sense. It just makes no sense. It's like there's so many holes in it that dude just sat down for a second and read one thing.
So we are recording this show on Friday night. It's gonna be posted on social media on Saturday. Once I get done editing it and putting it all together. So as of Saturday will be Royal Rumble. Royal Rumble is going to be in St. Louis. There's a lot of
fucking Charlotte came out tonight and said something about being in Kansas City, and I just totally forgot they were there. Like threw me for a loop.
So, and here's what's funny about that: tickets for the Royal Rumble right now are as cheap as they were for Kansas City tonight.
Really?
And I actually thought about.
Is it not sold out?
No.
That's wild.
No. How they're going to have the stage and then a big long ramp, but there's going to be a bunch of open seats behind the stage. So I wonder if the stage is going to look similar to what it looked like in 2020.
Could be.
But because I thought that was interesting. And those are the cheapest seats. They're like $40 a ticket.
I just figured it sold out. The Rumble usually sells pretty well.
Yeah. Well, so and I actually thought about buying a ticket and going, because there's going to be a lot of content creators there. A lot of content creators that I've seen on Twitter and especially on TikTok that are like, yo, hey, we're going to be at the Royal Rumble. Sean Ross Sapp was going to be at the Royal Rumble. I thought about like,
since it's in the Midwest, that's a pretty good spot just for everybody. Just
yeah,
you know,
it's like a 4-hour drive from Kansas City or from where I'm at. Yeah. I thought about it. I didn't do it.
Be cool to go. Rumble's fun.
Probably not going to do it, but since it is a huge event, it's one of the biggest events of the year. Figured we would donate a little bit of time here to it. Do you have a prediction since you've picked up watching
for the Rumble itself?
Yeah.
My heart, for some reason, and I don't even have like a real good reason, is like for some reason my heart and my brain keep telling me like Just say Kevin Owens. Because I really like Kevin Owens.
Yeah,
And that would be cool. But I don't
it
think
would
it's
be.
Kevin Owens.
No, that's not.
And
They've got Kevin Owens playing Seth Rollins. They got Kevin Owens playing Seth Rollins like sidekick right now. So
I
he's
saw
not.
I saw the match, the tag match they had,
Yeah.
where Roman interfered. So I'll go ahead. I'm gonna wrap two predictions into one because you can't have one without the other. I think Lashley beats Lesnar, and I think Lesnar wins the Rumble. Really do.
It's so funny because it's the most. It is the most like WWE idea that I've ever heard.
But I
Like,
also think something plays into it too, where they're like doing a reset because like when Roman had the COVID thing or whatever, and then remember they had like Lesnar win the belt. That's how he won the belt. Was like the original plan was him to face Reigns, right? And then they had to pull an audible.
no, the original plan was for him to face Goldberg.
Well, recently,
Yeah, when Roman left for COVID, this was 2020.
no,
Because
he had it recently. Reigns had it in the beginning of January.
okay, gotcha. I see what you're saying.
He missed the
Okay,
paper.
I thought you were talking about last year. Okay,
No, whenever earlier this
yeah,
year, remember it was supposed to be Lesnar and Reigns.
yeah, and then he tested positive for
Day
COVID.
one or whatever.
Yeah,
So
and
then,
then that's
and
when they threw Lesnar into the WWE title match and he won.
yeah, so I think this is the reset
Yeah.
where Lesnar now drops the belt so they can have the match at Mania, and it's for the one title because it makes no sense to have it title versus title because like it makes the Rumble like what does the Rumble winner do?
Yeah.
Unless they made it like a three-way, I guess, and then they're doing the two championships again, which I hate.
So there is talk. There has been like some rumors going around that they're looking at resetting and getting rid of the brand extension
I've seen that. Probably
because
everybody's jumping all over the place now.
yeah,
So what's the point?
which always happens. Like it's so weird. Like it's like every single time. Like it feels like they've done a draft. They'll do this thing where they do the draft. They did the draft 20 years ago. So then they let the draft go, and it's all fine and dandy. Guys are wrestling on Raw, guys are wrestling on SmackDown, whatever. They'll do the co-brand pay-per-views, then they'll try and do the single brand pay-per-views and only do co-brand pay-per-views for the big ones. That doesn't work out. So then they'll slowly revert back to every pay-per-view being co-brand. Then they'll slowly revert back to guys being able to switch shows, and then they'll just
Remember
slowly get rid of it.
what was the
And then
thing
they're like,
they
and then
did
they'll
this?
do this thing where they'll go, "Oh, hey, we're gonna redraft." Like, well, the draft didn't work the two other times you did it, guys. Why are we doing it again?
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
Especially when but that's the thing. Goes back to the thing. They kind of just like ruin their own stuff sometimes by making like
yeah,
stipulations not matter and making like rules not matter. It's like who cares? They're always like, who cares? Like, who gives a shit? Just do it.
yeah,
It's like, okay, well, doesn't make any sense, but whatever.
yeah.
So
So,
my guess is my prediction is that Lesnar wins.
so my prediction, I was going with who's got the hot hand. Um, Big E winning was really hot.
Yeah, I thought about maybe Big E.
And then Big E dropped the title in that multi-man match to Lesnar. They can say that whole thing with Lesnar wasn't done on an audible, but it was. Um, they like because people were like, "Oh, Lesnar only won the title because Roman got sick," and then they said, "No, Lesnar was supposed to win that match regardless."
I don't think
And
he won.
I don't buy that. I think that's stupid. What was Lesnar supposed to do? Lose to Roman and then go out and beat the five guys and win the title? Like, although that wouldn't shock me, they've done something similar in the past. So that's why your prediction just makes me laugh my ass off because it's
Just
like
adds to the Lesnar lore.
exactly. So I think that I think Big E wins. I think they play with the hot hand. Um, I think Lesnar costs Roman the title to Seth, and then Lesnar wins his match, and then they do a switcheroo.
They could do that.
They
They'd
take
certainly
the Universal title back to Raw. Big E fights Seth at WrestleMania or some type of match at WrestleMania involving Big E and Seth. It could be a multi-man match. Who knows? And then we get Lesnar versus Reigns for the WWE title at WrestleMania. Lesnar's the champion. Reigns wins. It makes sense. Lesnar goes on hiatus for a few months, and Reigns continues his run at the top.
they certainly are leaning in pretty hard on like Reigns can't beat Rollins, but part of me thinks that they're leaning into that so heavily because he's going to beat Rollins. They want you to believe that he can't, even
Yeah.
though like logic tells you like he probably will, especially because like the a lot of people think that the original idea was supposed to be McIntyre, but then he got hurt. So if it's not, if this is kind of just like I don't think McIntyre was going to beat him. So if they're still kind of going in line with that, just with a new person, I think Reigns probably beats him. But I could see them doing that, and then I can see Lesnar retaining. But I kind of think Lesnar's going to lose because they're also playing into they're making it seem like he's not taking Lashley very serious. And so I think Lashley gets him because Lashley also admitted like this is going to be the shortest title reign of your career because Lesnar always has long, lengthy title reigns. So I think there's a time where they like switch that up, and they're like, oh well, he could lose too. And
I see, like I said, I see this kind of being like remember Goldberg and Lesnar back in 2004 or 2004.
mm-hmm.
Lesnar cost Goldberg the title, and then Goldberg cost Lesnar the title, and then they fought at WrestleMania in a non-title match, WrestleMania 20. I kind of see this being something similar, where I could see Lesnar, Heyman costing Reigns the title against Seth. Reigns gets pissed off, tries to cost Lesnar the title, but doesn't succeed. Lesnar still winds up winning, and then Lesnar and Reigns wind up fighting for the WWE title at WrestleMania, and then the titles make a swaparoo. The Universal title goes back to Raw. The WWE title goes back to SmackDown.
I could see it. I mean, we're at least in agreement that obviously, like the Mania matches is obviously Reigns and Lesnar. That's where they have to go at this point.
Yeah, they're not going anywhere else. There's nobody. There's nobody if they're not gonna do Rock and Reigns this year, which obviously they're not. Then it's gonna be Lesnar and Reigns.
Right.
So, do you have a prediction on the women's Royal Rumble?
I thought about Bianca, but she's won it once before. That doesn't mean anything. You always kind of think Charlotte because it's Charlotte.
Yep.
And
they're leaning on Charlotte a lot right now.
I hate to say it, but I think I'm going to be real. I think I'm buying into that. It's going to be Rousey.
Damn it.
What I'm buying into. Like, I think I'm buying the rumors. And I think let up Rousey at Mania.
So I'm going to be honest with you, man. I was going to wait for you to do your pick. And then I was going to be like, all right, Chase hot take. I think it's going to be Rousey.
I think it's Rousey. I was looking up so much stuff, and like people believe that she's going to be in it.
Yeah.
That she's at least going to be there. So I mean, who knows? I think people were like, weren't there rumors also swirling like last year and she like didn't show up and everybody was like,
yeah. There's, I mean, the rumors have been swirling since she left, and because a lot of people wanted to see the Four Horsemen versus the Four Horsemen,
which they should have did that so long ago.
They should have. That was a big money match that they missed out on. Um, yeah, man. I don't know, man. I might, I might, I might drop some money and drive to St. Louis tomorrow. I don't know. Um,
You're a nut.
I, so, um, real quick. So we already got our winner for the Royal Rumbles. We'll kind of just do a quick shot real quick. I'll throw the match at. There's not very many other matches besides
Like
the Royal
5
Rumble
points,
matches.
including the Rumble. Yeah, the Rumble matches, right?
Yep. So Rollins versus Reigns for the Universal Championship.
So I think Reigns wins.
Okay.
I, I
I
just I
uh,
just I think they're building up Rollins as that he's basically like the Reigns stopper, and I think it's because Reigns is actually going to beat him this time.
okay. I think Seth Rollins will win. Like I said, I think because of interference from either Heyman or Lesnar. I think Heyman would be a a super fun idea for them to add to the story of Lesnar versus Reigns. If Heyman came out and distracted Reigns, and Rollins got the best of him and pinned him, and then Reigns tries to do the same thing to Brock and is unsuccessful.
It could happen because Reigns has disrespected Heyman since all this kind of started. So
Yeah.
I can see it.
I don't know if you saw the thing or not, but a couple weeks ago on SmackDown they had that thing where like Heyman got all like super emotional with Roman. He was like, "You were my tribal chief," and then Lesnar was like, "Shut up," and then Roman was like, "Yo, don't talk to him like that."
Yeah, but didn't Reigns also kind of say something to him like what the fuck, like where like
Yeah,
maybe
yeah, like
everyone's just kind of
yeah.
like what's with this dude, like.
Yeah, Reigns like called him a rat or called him something, and then that's when Heyman
Maybe
got
that's
super emotional.
maybe that's the ploy. Maybe Heyman, maybe the Lesnar thing. Maybe Lesnar goes on last. I don't know if they'll do that with 2 Rumbles, but like if that match goes last, maybe Heyman costs him the belt and then gets back with Reigns. And it's like this was all part of the.
I could see that happening at WrestleMania
I can see that too. And
as
then
a
Lesnar
way.
talked for a while.
So you got Reigns, I've got Rollins, Brock Lesnar versus Bobby Lashley.
I got Lashley.
Okay, I got Lesnar because, like I said, I think Lesnar's going to take the title to SmackDown. They're gonna do a switcheroo.
And it's not crazy.
Um,
I mean, we all know how much the WWE loves Lesnar having titles for long periods of time. So.
yeah. I just don't see, I I think one of the coolest things has, about this run with Lesnar, not only his look and his attitude and that he's funny, and I like a face Lesnar as a, kind of like a little bit of a change.
An anti-hero in a way because he's still
Yeah,
kind
yeah, exactly.
of, he'll still beat the shit out of anybody, but
Yeah, he's still a dick, but you're right. He's like the anti-hero. Um, I think that WWE likes, or I have liked seeing him be the challenger, him being, the chase. Um,
it's a
uh,
different feel too because he's been champion so much.
yeah, I don't think WWE feel, to me, I think Lesnar being, being in the chase for the title is a good thing. I don't think WWE thinks the same way. I think they keep the title on Lesnar as a way for Roman to triumph Lesnar
I
at
think
WrestleMania.
they'll always view Lesnar as like the final boss.
Yeah. Um, we have Edge and Beth Phoenix versus The Miz and Maurice.
I think Edge and Beth win.
I do too. I do too.
I saw some people thinking that it could go the other way, but I don't. They could do something. I mean, it's WWE. Sometimes their booking gets kind of weird, and I don't even think Miz and Maurice winning is like necessarily the wrong call. But I just think like Edge and Beth winning. I think like it's what everybody wants, and I don't think anyone losing this thing. Like, like I said, I kind of just got back into the product like recently, but like it just doesn't seem like a loss for either one of these teams. Like will necessarily hurt them, but I just think Edge and Beth teaming up. I think like it's a bigger deal if they like win for the fans. I think they want to see it. So I think it's
Yeah.
gonna be.
Becky Lynch versus Dewdrop.
I think it's Becky. I think it's the easiest call.
I don't. I like Dewdrop. I actually liked Dewdrop a lot when she was in NXT UK. She was Piper Niven in NXT UK, and I thought it was
An awful name, maybe the worst in the business.
huh?
Dewdrop's an absolute awful name.
Yes, absolutely, agree. And I was watching some past stuff. They had Eva Marie bring her from NXT UK, and the only reason they brought her from NXT UK is because she's a heavyset girl, and Eva Marie is like super beautiful. So Eva Marie kind of treated her like her ugly best friend, kind of thing.
Lingering around at that time on like Twitter and stuff, and it was pretty rough.
Yeah, because I mean, there's all these women on NXT UK, Kaylee Ray, and NXT that they could have brought up, but they only brought Piper because she was a heavyset girl to be with Eva Marie, and of course they wound up letting go Eva Marie. But I'm happy that they're doing stuff with Dewdrop. I would completely lose my shit if Dewdrop won.
That segment that she had with Becky the other night was good.
Yeah,
I thought it was.
But I think that they are building towards a big match between Charlotte and Becky, or Ronda and Becky.
I think it's wrong. I think if Ronda wins the Rumble, I think she challenges Becky. That's the feud we've been for since she left.
Yeah. So, if she, if she wins, and I mean, I think Becky's going to win. I want Dewdrop to win, but Becky's my pick. And then we already did our Royal Rumble predictions. So that, my friend, closes us out.
Finite. Yeah, I'm actually excited for the card tomorrow. I haven't said that about the WWE card in a while, but I'm excited for it. I like the Rumble. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
We had a good time.
Yeah. I always enjoy the Rumble too. I can't really think of anything from last year that really kind of stands out to me.
Last year might have been the first year I actually didn't watch it, I think, in like a long, long time.
Yeah, Edge won last year, didn't he?
He did win last year, but I don't think I just don't remember actually like sitting down and watching it. But that was the first one I missed in forever, and I remember thinking I wanted to watch it, and then just kind of happened, and I just kind of let it go.
Yeah.
But I'm excited for this one. I mean, like I said, I've been trying to get back into the product and stuff, and there's some stuff that they are doing that is genuinely like really good. So
yeah, like I said, the Roman stuff is good. Lesnar's gold. Seth. Like I said, I don't like Seth Rollins as a person, but he's always putting on good matches, and he's fairly entertaining. He's got a weird.
I don't know at all what his gimmick is, but that's fine.
Yeah,
I guess.
Like I said, he's supposed to be just over the top.
But I like the story that they have is easy with Reigns, and it sells. Like you bring up the Shield stuff, and you bring up the fact that he's beating him every time, and it's done. It's easy.
Yeah. Did you see Seth dropped Mox's name?
I didn't see it, but I had seen people talk about it, and people thought that he was going to be in the Rumble, which is absolutely ridiculous. But
absolutely ridiculous. And we can talk about that on other shows. Like I said, we've hit the 3-hour mark, but I don't see. I see it being a very long time before Mox and WWE mend that relationship.
Yeah, we've seen so many times that guys we didn't think were going to go back. So I'm not
absolutely.
He never will, but
No.
he's one of those guys that like I also wouldn't be surprised if he never went back. He just seems like they soured him, and he's having the time of his life doing what he's doing now, and he seems healthier than ever, given what he just went through and stuff. And he
Yeah.
looks very good. And AEW's letting him do a bunch of different shit. I mean, that dude
Yeah.
looks like when he's out there, he's having a blast. So
Yeah.
I just it was a weird rumor that lasted all of like a week and then died.
Cody Rhodes show up at the Rumble?
Absolutely not. He's not showing up at the Rumble. I don't see that happening at all. I think the contract stuff is so silly. I think there's not really anything to it. I think it got reported, and I think Cody leaned into it because like, why not?
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, maybe it was sort of planted in a way, because I think even Sean Ross Sapp kind of said after the fact, he was like, yeah, it was like, he said, I think he had mentioned like, it's not surprising to me that they had reported he was a free agent. And then it was literally like minutes later, the AEW Twitter account reported that he was going to show up on the show on Wednesday. And they were like, yeah, Cody's returning this Wednesday.
Yeah.
And Cody had dropped like subtle hints. I know there's something he does. I don't exactly know what it is, but it's some group where he like sends out tweets and stuff. It's like an AEW like community thing. And he tweets in it sometimes, and there's certain people in it if they're part of the group. And I know after all that had happened, he had like tweeted out something about like always bet on yourself as like an inspirational thing, and people were like, "Oh." So I just think I think it could have just been weird timing. I saw Dave kind of mentioned. I saw Meltzer kind of mention that like it could just be weird timing. Like Cody was at one of the shows when he was supposed to defend the title originally against Sammy. And he pulled up. He was there, and then he got a phone call, and he had a family emergency, and he went home. And Cody's contract was believed to be up when the year rolled over, and Tony likes to do contract signings in person. So it was very possible at that moment that he had just not seen Tony. And like the contract was there. So technically he was a free agent.
Yeah. Like I said, like I've told you,
It's insane if he showed up in the Rumble though.
yeah, but like I had told you, I think it's just more or less of a thing where they, it got leaked, they learned about it, and then Cody and Tony were kind of like, hey, we could have some fun with this, and that's it. I honestly just think it's a fact of Cody's been extremely busy, you know, doing what he does for AEW, doing the TV shows for TNT, and then also the family stuff. So I think it was just like one of those things where it's like, yeah, I will sign it. I have all intentions to. I'll sign it when I sign it. I'm obviously not going anywhere. I'm obviously extremely invested in this company.
And the television station. He's got two things going on with that television station.
Yeah. So I don't think Cody's going anywhere. I wanted to throw something at you real quick before we sign off, and it worked.
An interesting thought, and I think it would be absolutely insane if it were to happen. But it's just one of those things that's not going to happen. It would also be insane if all of a sudden $1 million dropped in my bank account, but that's also not going to happen. There are crazy things that could happen, could be pretty cool, but like normally those things don't happen. So I don't think this is happening either.
Yeah. Well, so like I said, we are over the 3-hour mark. Man, I've had a blast.
Dude, kick off the first show. We went a little long, but
Yep. Like I said, for a first show, for an introduction, kind of just letting everybody know, what we're about, what we like, what we don't like, to kind of just get an idea. We've given you plenty of content to make that decision, if you like us or not, and hopefully you'll come back and listen. I will post all of my social medias, but it's pretty easy. It's CR Media 1988. Just because CR Media, obviously they won't let me take that something that simple. I know it says at CR Media right here, but it is CR Media 1988. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, and TikTok. So I'll be posting clips of this show on all those. And then I will also be converting this to an audio, and we will upload it to all of your favorite audio places for you to get your podcasts. Because I'm sure our good friend Josh will want to listen to it while he's driving to random places. So
yeah, that's what he likes to do. Just
Yeah.
tune in weird stuff and then let us know that he's listening to it when we don't always care, but that's all right.
So, like I said, this will be posted on Saturday, January 29th. And Mr. Hackett, is that going to be our day? Friday nights, and
Yeah,
then we post it
me.
on Saturdays. Okay, all
Absolutely.
right. So, with that being said, you can catch us Saturday, every Saturday, on my social medias. Like I said, and we will be posting content from there. And other than that, I'm all good, man. You got anything else?
No, that's it. I guess you can follow me on my Twitter. I don't really use it that often, but feel free. It's just at Seth_Hackett. You can find me on Facebook. Also, don't use that a lot. You can find me on Instagram. Also, don't use that a lot. I don't even know why I have most of these things, but I do have them. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
We'll be back next week.
Yeah. Other than that, adios. Catch you later.
All right, see